It began with a whisper beneath the waves, the faint hum of diesel engines, the churn of propellers, and the shadow of a predator gliding silently through the depths. It was not large, nor grand, nor armored like the giants that ruled the surface, but in its smallness lay its power. It was the Type VII U-boat, the sleek, lethal workhorse of Germany's undersea fleet, the wolf of the Atlantic. From the frozen seas of Norway to the warm waters off the Azores, from the coasts of America to the mouth of the Mediterranean, the Type VII hunted the lifelines of nations. It was the backbone of the Kriegsmarine's U-boat arm, the weapon that nearly starved Britain into surrender, and the machine that carried thousands of young men into the black unknown of the deep. It was not just a submarine, it was a world, a legend, and a tomb. This is the story of the Type VII U-boat, the silent hunter that defined the Battle of the Atlantic, and the men who lived, fought, and died within its narrow hull. When the Second World War began in 1939, the German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, faced a simple truth. It could not match Britain's Royal Navy in size or firepower. The battleships and carriers of the surface fleet were few, outnumbered, and outgunned. But beneath the waves lay another kind of power, stealth, endurance, and fear. The U-boat, short for Unterseeboot or undersea boat, would become Germany's answer to Allied naval supremacy. And at the heart of that undersea force stood the Type VII, compact, efficient, and deadly. It was the culmination of decades of German engineering and tactical innovation. First launched in the mid-1930s, it was designed for range, reliability, and speed, able to cross the Atlantic, strike convoys, and vanish before the enemy could strike back. At just over 220 feet long, the Type VII was smaller than most submarines of its time. Yet it carried a deadly arsenal, 14 torpedoes, a deck gun, and a crew of 44 men. Its interior was a labyrinth of pipes, valves, and dials, every inch packed with machinery and life. Space was so limited that sailors slept between torpedoes, their bunks stacked over the weapons that would soon leave the hull in trails of bubbles and fire. The air smelled of diesel and metal, the temperature swung from freezing to suffocating, and the pressure of the sea pressed against every rivet and seam. It was a vessel built for efficiency, not comfort, a machine stripped to the essentials, designed for war. And in the hands of skilled captains, it became one of the most formidable weapons of the age. The Type VIIa was the first of its line, a prototype that gave birth to a dynasty. Then came the Type VIIb, faster and more heavily armed, and finally the Type VIIc, the version that would define the Atlantic War. More than 700 Type VIIcs were built, forming the core of the U-boat fleet. They were the vessels that carried the names that would echo through naval history. U-47, commanded by Günther Prien, who slipped into Scapa Flow and sank the battleship Royal Oak. U-99, under Otto Kretschmer, the tonnage king, who sank more ships than any other commander. U-100, led by Joachim Schepke, the golden boy of Nazi propaganda. Together, these men and their crews brought Britain to the brink of starvation, in what Churchill would later call the only thing that really frightened me during the war, the Battle of the Atlantic. In the early years, the U-boats ruled the seas. The Type VII could strike with devastating effect, slipping beneath convoys, surfacing at night, and firing torpedoes with deadly precision. Its engines could drive it at 17 knots on the surface and 7 knots submerged, and its hull could withstand the crushing pressure of depths over 700 feet. For months at a time, these boats prowled the Atlantic like wolves, guided by Admiral Karl Donitz, the architect of the Rudel tactic, the wolf pack tactic. Dozens of U-boats, coordinated by radio, would converge on Allied convoys in the dark, attacking in waves, sowing chaos and terror. Ships burned from horizon to horizon. Survivors drifted on rafts, their faces lit by the glow of oil fires. Beneath them, the U-boats glided silently away, unseen, undefeated. But the glory came with a price. Life aboard a Type VII was a test of endurance and will. The crew lived in darkness, surrounded by machinery and the constant threat of death. Fresh air was a luxury. Every man carried the smell of diesel in his clothes and salt on his skin. They slept beside torpedoes, ate canned meat, and drank bitter coffee laced with rust. When submerged, they breathed recycled air, hot, stale, heavy with carbon dioxide. The hull groaned with pressure, the lights flickered, and every ping of Allied sonar sent a shiver through the crew. The Type VII was their home, their coffin, their entire world. By 1943, the tide began to turn. The Allies had learned. Radar sonar, long-range aircraft, and escort carriers began to close the Atlantic gap. The once invisible U-boats found themselves hunted. The Type VII, once the predator, became the prey. The ocean, vast and merciless, turned against them. Depth charges thundered through the deep, bursting around the hull like underwater explosions of hell. The men waited in darkness, silent as rivets popped and metal screamed under pressure. The smell of oil and fear filled the boat, and yet they endured, holding their breath as the explosions came closer, waiting for the sound that meant it was over. The silence of the deep. By the war's end, more than 700 Type VII U-boats had been lost. Of the 40,000 men who served aboard them, over 30,000 never returned. They died in darkness, beneath the waves, their boats crushed or shattered, their bodies entombed in steel. The Atlantic became their graveyard, their resting place silent and eternal. Yet their story did not end in defeat. The Type VII had changed naval warfare forever. Its design influenced submarines for decades to come. Its balance of range, speed, and lethality setting the standard for the modern undersea fleet. Today, a few Type VII boats still exist, preserved in museums, their narrow corridors frozen in time. Visitors who step inside can still feel it, the claustrophobia, the pressure, the hum of history lingering in the air. You can stand where the captain once peered through the periscope, where sailors once whispered prayers before a dive. You can almost hear the hum of the engines, the whisper of the ocean against the hull, and the silence that always followed. The Type VII was not just a machine. It was a symbol of everything the sea demands: endurance, courage, and sacrifice. It was the wolf that stalked the convoys, the weapon that brought empires to the edge, and the coffin that carried so many young men to the bottom of the world. Tonight we descend once more into that world of steel and silence, into the dim red light of the control room, the narrow bunks beside the torpedoes, and the crushing depths where the wolves once hunted. This is the entire history of the Type VII U-boat, the Wolf of the Atlantic, the weapon that nearly won a war beneath the waves, and the steel tomb that swallowed a generation. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you tonight? The ocean has always carried within it a quiet mystery, a surface that glitters under the sun while concealing a vast world below. For centuries, sailors looked upon the sea with reverence and fear, knowing it could nourish trade or swallow entire fleets without warning. Beneath its rolling swells lies an endless silence, where light fades into darkness and pressure crushes all but the strongest forms of life. This hidden realm has long stirred human imagination, inspiring myths of sea monsters and unseen forces moving just out of sight. Yet in the 20th century, humanity gave shape to its own predator beneath the waves. The submarine, a vessel designed not to be seen, turned the ancient mystery of the deep into a weapon of war. It moved not with sails or the cry of gulls, but with engines muffled against the water, gliding through the unseen corridors of the sea. In this secret world, no warning was given until destruction rose from below. And so, the ocean became not only a stage for storms and trade, but also for shadows that lived in silence. The story of one such shadow begins with the vessel known as the Type VII. The Type VII U-boat was not the first submarine ever built, nor even the first to bring terror to the surface, but it became the most enduring and infamous. Designed in Germany in the years leading to the Second World War, it combined simplicity with lethal efficiency. It was small enough to be built in large numbers, yet capable of long journeys into the wide Atlantic. Its steel hull, no larger than a modest coastal vessel, held the ability to dive beneath the waves and vanish from sight. With its torpedoes hidden in the bow, it carried enough power to cripple convoys and challenge entire navies. More than any other design, it came to embody the submarine's image as a hunter beneath the sea. Sailors feared its approach, not because they could see it, but because they could not. To face the Type VII was to face uncertainty itself, a foe that struck unseen and then slipped back into the ocean's silence. In time, this boat would be remembered as the Wolf of the Atlantic, and as with all wolves, its strength lay not only in its bite, but in the fear it inspired. The origins of such a vessel lie not in sudden inspiration, but in gradual steps. As German engineers studied earlier submarine models from the First World War. In that earlier conflict, the U-boat had already shown its potential, sinking merchant ships and shaking the confidence of great naval powers. But the lessons of that war also revealed the weaknesses of the first designs, which lacked endurance and reliability. The interwar years became a period of quiet experimentation, when the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles limited Germany's ambitions, yet could not entirely silence them. By the early 1930s, when secrecy gave way to open rearmament, the Kriegsmarine sought a new generation of submarines. They wanted a design that could serve as a backbone, capable of mass production and consistent performance. The result would be the Type VII, a boat small enough to hide in the sea, yet strong enough to cross oceans. Its dimensions were modest, around 220 feet long, with a crew of just over 40 men. But its impact would stretch across half the world, carried by steel, diesel, and the quiet resolve of those who sailed within it. Thus the Wolf's outline began to take shape in the shadows of history. The ocean itself seemed almost designed to welcome such a creation, with its endless expanse offering both cover and challenge. Above, the waves could conceal the periscope's slender line, barely visible even to sharp eyes. Below, the water absorbed sound, carrying faint vibrations that made pursuit an uncertain task. The Type VII could slip into this natural theatre with a grace that belied its mechanical heart. Its engines throbbed against the silence, and its propellers spun a low rhythm, like a heartbeat beneath the waves. For the crew, the ocean was both enemy and ally, an environment that granted invisibility but demanded respect. The pressure of depth was always present, a reminder that steel could bend and men could not outlast the sea. Yet within those dangers, the ocean also offered safety, for it could hide the hunter as surely as it hid the hunted. To understand the Type VII, one must first understand the sea it served, and so the submarine and the ocean became inseparable, shadows and silence moving together. For sailors, to serve aboard a Type VII was to enter another world entirely, one far removed from the familiar air of the land. They would step into narrow passageways where every inch of space was claimed by machinery or stored provisions. The smell of diesel and oil clung to everything, mixing with the salt brought in by damp uniforms. Light was limited, casting the steel surfaces into a dull gleam, as though the boat itself wished to remain unseen. A man had little privacy, for bunks were shared, and rest came in brief intervals between duties. The sea pressed constantly against the hull, groaning faintly as the boat descended into its depths. In such confinement, the Type VII became both a weapon and a home, holding its crew in the same embrace as the sea held them. Fear and duty mingled with routine, creating a strange rhythm of existence. The men lived between silence and noise, between the surface and the deep, between life and the shadow of loss. In this atmosphere, the submarine gained its character not only from design, but from those who breathed within it. To the outside world, however, the Type VII became less a home than a legend. It was spoken of in whispers among merchant crews, who knew that the Atlantic could hide danger beyond the horizon. Allied sailors gave voice to their unease, describing sudden torpedoes that came without warning, leaving ships broken and aflame. The boat's reputation grew far larger than its actual size, carried by the stories of survivors and the silence of those who never returned. Governments spoke of it as a threat to national lifelines, for it aimed at the arteries of supply that kept armies and civilians alive. In German propaganda, it was painted as the sharp edge of naval power, striking blows where surface fleets could not. Thus, the submarine became more than a tool of war. It became a symbol, at once admired and feared. Its very name U-boat echoed with menace in ports from Liverpool to New York. But beneath these stories lay only steel, engines and men hidden in the ocean's fold. And in that fold, the myth began to overshadow the machine itself. Yet even myths must begin with simple truths, and the truth of the Type VII was its design. It carried 4 torpedo tubes in the bow and 1 in the stern, a deadly armament within a modest frame. Its range allowed it to patrol thousands of miles, venturing from bases in France or Norway deep into the Atlantic. It could dive to depths of over 200 meters, though few captains dared to push the limits of its endurance. It was faster on the surface than submerged, yet it relied on the cover of the sea to survive. The deck gun mounted above gave it additional firepower, though it would later grow obsolete in the face of enemy aircraft. Each part of the boat was balanced between necessity and efficiency, forming a vessel meant for war, but also for endurance. The Type VII was not perfect, but it was sufficient, and in war, sufficiency is often enough. This simple effectiveness is what allowed it to multiply in numbers until hundreds roamed the seas, and with each one, the shadow beneath the waves grew darker. The ocean, however, cared little for shadows, legends, or symbols. Its waves continued to rise and fall, as they had for millennia, indifferent to the vessels that dared to traverse them. To the sea, the Type VII was only another shape in the endless cycle of storms, calms, and tides. Yet to humanity, it became a figure of fear and fascination, a steel predator dwelling where the eye could not follow. The story of this boat is not only about technology, but about how people confronted the unknown. It tells of how nations sought to master the deep, and how men faced the silence within it. The wolf beneath the waves was born of human hands, but its lair was the ancient ocean. Together they created a partnership of menace and mystery, one that would shape the course of the Second World War. And so the shadow below the waves became the first chapter in a long and haunting story. From here the tale will move from design to deployment, and from legend to reality. Kiel, on the Baltic coast of Germany, had long been a city tied to the sea, its harbour filled with the rhythm of steel and salt air. By the 1930s, it was no longer only a port of fishing boats and ferries, but a place where vast shipyards turned dreams of naval power into reality. The shipyards rang with the echo of hammers and the low hum of welding as sparks fell like fleeting stars against the dark frames of vessels under construction. Here the Type VII began its life, not as a prowling hunter, but as steel plates stacked in orderly rows. Men in heavy coats and gloves worked day and night, their labor guided by blueprints drawn with precision and secrecy. The treaty restrictions of the past were quietly discarded, and with each strike of metal upon metal, the shadow of rearmament grew stronger. Rivets clicked into place, girders rose like ribs of an iron creature, and slowly the submarine's form emerged. The shipyard smelled of oil, salt, and hot iron, a scent that clung to every worker long after they left for home. The bustle was constant, yet beneath it all was the stillness of purpose, a certainty that these boats were destined for more than harbour waters. And so within the quiet pulse of Kiel, the Wolf of the Atlantic began to take shape. The design of the Type VII was both ambitious and practical, blending lessons from the First World War with the ambitions of a new conflict still on the horizon. It was not intended to be the largest submarine, but it was meant to be the most reliable. Its dimensions were carefully balanced, so it could be produced quickly and in great numbers without losing strength or endurance. German engineers gave it a hull strong enough to withstand depth pressures that earlier boats could not, while keeping the interior compact and efficient. The diesel engines were chosen not for luxury, but for the steady beat they could provide, driving the boat swiftly across the surface, and silently when submerged on battery power. Every line on the blueprint served a purpose. Every curve of the hull tested to slip through water with minimal resistance. It was a craft of utility, not grandeur, and its beauty lay in its deadly efficiency. In Kiel's workshops, draftsmen traced those lines with care, knowing that thousands of tons of steel would follow the ink. The design was simple enough for replication, yet advanced enough to outmatch the technology of rivals, and from this balance of ambition and restraint, the Type VII became the backbone of Germany's undersea fleet. The workers of Kiel were not warriors, yet they built with the seriousness of men who knew their labor carried weight beyond themselves. Many were shipbuilders whose fathers and grandfathers had worked the same docks, now shaping fishing boats, merchant ships, and submarines side by side. They woke early to the whistle of the yards, worked among the clang of iron and the hiss of welding torches, and left when the light faded from the Baltic sky. Their hands grew calloused, their backs bent from the lifting of beams and plates, but their minds were fixed on the task of creation. Each rivet driven into place was a note in a larger song of industry, each completed frame a step closer to the sea. The sound of construction was relentless, a mixture of hammer, saw, and shouted orders, but beneath the noise was the deeper hum of something emerging. They could not know the full course of history, but they knew that the boats they built would soon sail far from Kiel's familiar shores. There was pride in their skill, even when hidden beneath secrecy, for the boats they produced were spoken of with quiet admiration. The city's skyline filled with cranes and smokestacks, while its harbour filled with half-built forms waiting for launch, and thus the daily lives of ordinary workers became entwined with the creation of extraordinary vessels. As the skeletons of submarines grew, their presence reshaped the city itself. Streets near the harbour echoed with footsteps of workers and the rumble of carts carrying steel to the docks. Inns and cafes filled with men in heavy coats, their voices rising with talk of wages, fatigue, and the endless cycle of construction. At night, floodlights turned the shipyards into islands of brightness against the Baltic dark, casting long shadows over the water. Families who lived nearby could see the cranes moving even after midnight, their tall arms lifting steel like toys in a child's game. The clatter never ceased, for the demands of rearmament pressed upon every hour, urging faster production and greater output. To the citizens of Kiel, the yards became both lifeblood and burden, bringing work yet binding them to a cause they could not fully escape. The river of industry flowed unbroken, carrying raw iron in and sending submarines out to sea. In this way, the city became a silent partner to history, its rhythm aligned with the birth of machines built for war. It was a partnership not chosen freely, but one shaped by the tides of politics and ambition. And in this union of city and steel, the Type VII came quietly to life. Launching day was a moment of stillness amid the ceaseless noise, when the skeleton of steel finally revealed its true form as a vessel. Workers and officials gathered along the slipways, watching as the hull, painted dark, glistened under the light. It slid from the rails with a groan, the Baltic water rushing up to embrace it as though the sea had been waiting all along. The sound of its first contact was deep and final, a splash that marked the boat's passage from land to sea. Flags sometimes fluttered above, though much of the ceremony was muted by secrecy, for not every vessel's purpose could be spoken aloud. For the men who had built it, there was pride in seeing their work float freely, held aloft by the same waters that had shaped their city for centuries. Yet there was also a quiet unease, for each submarine was a child of war, destined not for peace, but for patrols that might never return. The ocean accepted the boat without question, its waves rocking it gently as though testing its balance. The workers returned to their tasks, knowing another hull waited behind it, another wolf waiting to be born. And with each launch, the shadow beneath the waves grew longer. Inside the new hulls, the finishing touches revealed the nature of the submarine's dual world. Narrow passageways were lined with valves, gauges, and wires, every surface functional and none ornamental. Diesel engines were lowered into place, heavy and humming, while batteries filled with acid took their silent posts. Torpedo tubes yawned like hollow mouths at the bow, awaiting their unseen cargo. Bunks were fitted in cramped tiers, shared by men who would come to know the closeness of steel and silence. Food supplies were stored in every available space, even in the torpedo room, where sacks of bread might rest against deadly machinery. The air was heavy with the smell of oil and paint, soon to be joined by the breath of 40 men living in close quarters. Each corner of the boat was marked by efficiency, a design without waste, where comfort was a stranger and survival the only luxury. Yet within this steel shell, a kind of order emerged, as though the submarine itself demanded discipline. It was no longer merely steel and rivets, but a living vessel prepared for the deep, and so the wolf was given its teeth, and its lair was made ready. The ambition behind these efforts was vast, reaching far beyond Kiel's harbours to the oceans themselves. Germany, hemmed in by geography and limited in surface fleets, looked to the submarine as its answer to the Royal Navy's strength. The Type VII was the chosen instrument, a vessel to challenge the Atlantic lifelines and test the endurance of nations across the sea. In Berlin, officials spoke of strategy and blockade, while in Kiel, the talk was of deadlines and output. Yet the two worlds met in the steel hulls rising along the docks, where politics turned into machinery and machinery turned into war. Each boat was a thread in a wider net, woven to stretch across thousands of miles of ocean. Ambition gave urgency to the shipyards, where even exhaustion could not slow the pace of production. The sea was waiting, and those who directed the war effort knew that speed was as important as strength. For the workers, this ambition meant longer hours and greater demands, but also the knowledge that their city's efforts carried weight far beyond its shores, and thus ambition took material form, resting on the waters of the Baltic. Kiel's shipyards became hives of both noise and secrecy, their energy feeding directly into the future of naval war. Day after day, new hulls slid into the water, dark forms that soon disappeared toward training grounds and patrol routes. To walk the harbour was to see not only the boats themselves, but the transformation of a city into an engine of history. The air shimmered with smoke and salt, while the steady clang of hammers spoke of endless work. Within this environment, the Type VII grew from blueprints into a fleet, each boat a whisper of the menace that lay ahead. The ocean waited quietly, patient as always, until these wolves were ready to roam its depths, and the men who labored in Kiel, though they might not have known it, were giving shape to one of the most iconic machines of the century. The birth of the Type VII was not a moment but a process, a tide of effort flowing steadily forward. As one boat left the harbour, another rose in its place, each carrying the same promise of stealth and speed. And so the story moves from shipyards to the sea itself, where the wolves first tasted the hunt. The first Type VII boats left their harbours in the mid-1930s, quiet shapes that carried more than steel and men. They carried the weight of a nation rebuilding its navy, intent on rewriting the memory of the last war. Germany had been forbidden such vessels by treaty, yet here they were, dark hulls gliding into open waters under new banners. Their design was modest at a glance, but within lay an efficiency that promised to outlast restrictions and rival fleets alike. As the waves parted before their bows, the submarines revealed their true nature, not as experiments, but as weapons ready for service. Each launch was a moment of both pride and secrecy, a quiet unveiling of what would become the most numerous submarine design of the conflict. The officers who stood upon their decks knew the value of what they commanded, though few could yet imagine the scale of the battles ahead. For Germany, these launches were signs of momentum, of industry transformed into force. The first wolves had left their dens, and the sea was theirs to explore. And in the gentle rocking of the waves, a new era of undersea warfare quietly began. The Type VII's features set it apart, giving it strength without unnecessary weight. Its size was carefully chosen, small enough to be built in great numbers, yet large enough to carry endurance across thousands of miles. On the surface, it could travel swiftly, using its diesel engines to cover ground before diving. Submerged, it relied on batteries, moving silently in the dark world beneath the waves. It carried 5 torpedo tubes, 4 forward and 1 aft, with enough weapons to strike convoys again and again before returning home. Its range stretched far, yet it was nimble enough to slip unseen through narrow channels or patrol distant waters. Above the hull, a deck gun allowed surface engagements in calmer seas, though the true strength of the boat always lay in stealth. Crews trained to know every valve, every switch, every narrow passage of their vessel, for survival depended on intimate knowledge. To master such a craft was to blend human skill with mechanical precision in the tightest of spaces. And so the boat's features, though simple in outline, became the foundation of its reputation as the Wolf of the Atlantic. The men chosen to crew these new submarines were young, often in their 20s, filled with energy and a sense of purpose. Many had never traveled far from home before, yet now they were called to sail beneath the oceans of the world. Training was demanding not only for strength but for patience, for life inside a submarine required discipline more than bravado. They learned to move through narrow corridors without waste, to breathe calmly when the air grew stale, and to act swiftly in emergencies without panic. Each sailor had his duty from the engines to the torpedoes, and the smooth functioning of the boat depended on trust in every man aboard. In Kiel and Wilhelmshaven their voices mingled with the sounds of drills and orders, their bodies bending to routines that prepared them for the sea. They knew that steel and machinery could not succeed without human resolve, and they carried that resolve quietly within themselves. Few could yet imagine the hardships of long patrols or the silence of the deep, but they felt pride in belonging to something greater. The bond of crew to boat was forged before they ever left harbour, and with each crew prepared, another wolf was ready to roam. As these boats began their early voyages, the Kriegsmarine saw its hopes slowly take form. The Type VII proved itself not only seaworthy, but dependable, returning from patrols with data, experience, and the confidence of its officers. Commanders wrote reports praising its balance of speed, agility, and endurance, noting how it filled the exact role for which it was designed. It was not the largest submarine, nor the most luxurious, but it was the one best suited to multiply and endure. In strategy rooms, its presence gave planners the foundation for a larger undersea campaign. In harbours, its sight gave reassurance to a navy still growing in strength, reminding them that they possessed a weapon capable of striking where surface fleets could not. The Type VII was not a symbol of overwhelming might, but of quiet persistence, of many hands building many boats to form a silent net across the seas. That persistence would become its greatest strength in the years ahead. And for now, the Navy welcomed its new wolves with satisfaction and anticipation. Each departure into the Atlantic carried with it the sense of something just beginning. For the crews, the first taste of the ocean was both thrilling and unsettling. They left behind the familiar lights of German ports, exchanging them for the endless horizon where sky met sea. Days passed with the rhythm of diesel engines, nights with the soft rocking of the waves above them. When submerged, they listened to the muffled sounds of water pressing against the hull, feeling the boat as if it were part of themselves. Meals were taken in narrow spaces, laughter shared in whispers, and rest stolen in short hours between duties. At times they surfaced to fresh winds and the smell of salt, their lungs filled with air that seemed sweeter after time below. They spoke little of fear, for in these first voyages, the ocean was still more teacher than enemy. Each man measured himself against the demands of life aboard, discovering patience, resilience, and a closeness to his fellows. Slowly, the submarine ceased to be a machine and became instead a shared world, its walls holding the lives within it, as securely as the sea held the boat itself. And with every mile travelled, confidence grew. The world beyond Germany's coasts began to take notice. Though quietly at first, merchant captains whispered of U-boats sighted at a distance, their periscopes cutting brief lines against the waves before vanishing. Naval intelligence in Britain and France watched the growing numbers of submarines with unease, recalling the damage inflicted during the First World War. Reports trickled in of encounters and sightings, though these early boats were still few in number. Yet even small shadows can stretch long in the right light, and the Type VII began to cast such a shadow across the Atlantic. Its presence hinted at strategies not yet revealed, at dangers that might one day grow immense. For now it was an omen more than a storm, but sailors felt the unease that comes with knowing unseen eyes may be watching. The wolf had not yet shown its full strength, but the scent of its presence was carried on the wind. The anticipation was subtle but unmistakable, and those who understood the ocean knew that the first stirrings often signal what is to come. Back in Germany, the crews trained endlessly, each patrol sharpening skills, each drill weaving reflex into habit. They practiced silent running, cutting engines, and moving by battery power while listening for sounds that betrayed them. They learned to fire torpedoes with precision, judging distance, speed, and timing with cold accuracy. They endured simulated depth charge attacks, hearing explosions ripple through water and feeling the steel hull shudder under strain. These rehearsals were meant to prepare them, yet they also carried reminders of what lay ahead. The ocean would not forgive mistakes, and survival demanded attention to every detail. Pride grew among them, yet so did humility, for they knew their boat was strong, but the sea was stronger. What united them was not only skill, but trust, built slowly through shared challenges and routines. In this trust, the Type VII became more than a weapon. It became a brotherhood afloat beneath the waves. And through that brotherhood, the Wolf gained its spirit. The first deployments ended, as they had begun, with quiet arrivals back into port, greeted by families, officers, and the ever-present cranes of the shipyards. The boats returned scarred with salt but intact, their crews weary yet proud, reports of success, of endurance, and of the submarine's reliability filled the ears of those who planned for the future. The early promise of the Type VII was fulfilled, proving it could be both hunter and survivor. Though the war had not yet engulfed the world, the seeds of its ocean struggle were already sown. The Wolf had been unleashed, not yet in a frenzy, but in steady steps that hinted at the power it would wield. The sailors felt it too, that sense of something vast, waiting beyond the horizon. For now the sea was their ally, carrying them back to shore with stories of promise. But soon the sea would become their battlefield, and the promise would turn to struggle. And with that, the next chapter of the Wolf's journey begins to stir. The Atlantic lay vast and restless, its surface scattered with merchant ships carrying fuel, food, and raw materials across the waters. To Germany's naval planners, these lifelines were vulnerable arteries, stretched across seas too large to guard completely. The Type VII boats, small in number at first, moved out quietly to test their role in this grand struggle. Their commanders studied shipping lanes, learning where convoys gathered, where stragglers drifted alone, and where escorts were thinnest. Early patrols revealed both the challenges and the opportunities of waging war beneath the waves. Sailors who had trained for years now found themselves peering through periscopes, watching distant funnels of smoke on the horizon. When torpedoes struck, the shock was not only felt in steel, but in the hearts of those who realized the war at sea had begun. The destruction was measured not only in tonnage, but in the spreading fear carried across shipping circles. The Atlantic, once a path of commerce, was becoming a hunting ground, and in those first strikes, the Wolf began to test its fangs. The early hunts were solitary efforts, with single U-boats slipping across the waves in search of prey. Commanders relied on cunning and patience, for mistakes in timing or position could waste precious torpedoes. A merchant spotted too late might vanish over the horizon, while one engaged too rashly could summon an escort with depth charges. The ocean demanded silence, calculation, and endurance in equal measure. When victories came, they were spoken of with pride, but also with restraint, for every success was shadowed by the knowledge that the seas would only grow more dangerous. The boats returned with reports of their strikes, of ships sunk and routes disrupted, giving Germany a new confidence in its naval weapon. Yet these early patrols also revealed limits, for a single boat, however determined, could not cover the vastness of the Atlantic alone. Commanders began to imagine a new tactic, one that multiplied the reach of their wolves. The seeds of the wolf pack were planted in these lonely hunts, and from solitary shadows, an idea of coordinated attack slowly began to form. For the crews, the first taste of battle carried both exhilaration and unease. They felt the pulse of the engines as they slipped into firing positions, the stillness that fell when torpedoes slid from their tubes, and the tremor when explosions rolled across the sea. They listened to the sounds through the hull, muffled yet unmistakable, and knew that somewhere above a ship was faltering. In those moments time seemed to hold its breath, stretching long between the act of attack and the knowledge of its outcome. Some men whispered prayers, others sat silent, their faces calm but their thoughts racing. Later, as the boat slipped away unseen, there came a strange quiet, a reminder that their work was not only mechanical but deeply human. They rarely spoke of what had passed, for words seemed too sharp for the softness of the ocean that cradled them afterward. Their lives returned to the rhythms of watches, meals, and routines, as if nothing had happened at all, and yet each man carried the memory of those first hunts within him, etched deeper than he would admit. The sea, in its endless calm, seemed to keep those memories folded away in its waters. The merchant sailors who faced these early attacks began to tell stories of submarines that appeared without warning. A wake across the waves, a flash of a periscope, and then silence before disaster struck. Word spread quickly among crews, and soon even the hint of a submarine was enough to stir anxiety on long crossings. Ships altered their routes, lights were dimmed at night, and eyes strained against the horizon for any sign of the hidden hunter. These changes brought inconvenience, but also an acknowledgement that the war had touched the seas in earnest. Britain, dependent on its shipping for survival, recognized the seriousness of these first losses. Naval planners grew restless, searching for answers to the growing menace that seemed to lurk beneath the surface. Escorts were increased, patrols extended, and convoys began to take shape as a protective measure. Still the Wolf prowled, slipping between defenses with unsettling ease, and the legend of the U-boat began to take root in the minds of sailors everywhere. In Germany, the reports of success were used to encourage both the Navy and the nation. Tonnage sunk was calculated with precision numbers that told a story of disruption and effectiveness. Propaganda highlighted the accomplishments, portraying the U-boat arm as a sharp spear against enemy supply lines. Young men were inspired to join, eager to share in the adventure and the honor of the submarine service. Within the Kriegsmarine, these victories gave weight to calls for more boats, more crews, and more resources. The shipyards grew busier, their cranes lifting sections of steel, as new hulls took shape in rapid succession. The dream of an undersea force capable of challenging the world's greatest navies no longer seemed distant. Admirals spoke with growing conviction, convinced that the Wolfpack strategy could change the balance of the Atlantic. Each success, though modest alone, added momentum to the vision of coordinated strikes, and thus the early hunts became not only battles at sea, but the foundation of a doctrine. The idea of the Wolfpack was simple in theory, yet complex in practice. A single U-boat might shadow a convoy, sending radio messages back to headquarters. Other boats spread across patrol lines could then be directed toward the target, converging like hunters surrounding prey. Once gathered, the submarines would attack in waves, striking under the cover of darkness when escorts were stretched too thin. This concept promised to overwhelm defenses and turned small victories into decisive blows. The earliest experiments with this tactic were clumsy, hindered by limited communication and the unpredictability of the sea. Yet even imperfect attempts revealed the potential of group hunting, a strategy that turned scattered boats into coordinated packs. The Wolf, once solitary, was learning to hunt as part of a larger force, and with each success, the confidence of commanders grew. The ocean, once empty and endless, was beginning to feel crowded with unseen hunters. Life aboard the boats during these hunts remained a test of endurance. Weeks at sea meant cramped quarters, damp clothing, and the constant smell of oil and metal. Sleep came in narrow bunks, shared in shifts, while meals were eaten quickly in the close warmth of the galley. Fresh air was rare, treasured during moments on the surface, when the conning tower opened to the sky. Men passed the hours with routine maintenance, small repairs, and conversation that drifted softly in the confines of steel walls. Letters from home, read again and again, offered comfort in the long monotony between battles. The sea was both enemy and companion, a vast expanse that isolated them yet sustained their mission. They endured not for glory, but for each other, bound together by the quiet brotherhood of shared hardship. Each patrol carried the weight of risk, but also the unspoken pride of belonging to something secret and powerful. And in that mixture of strain and loyalty, the wolf pack found its heart. By the end of these first campaigns, the Atlantic was no longer the same. Merchant ships sailed with more caution, convoys grew more frequent, and escorts sharpened their vigilance. Yet the U-boats continued to strike, proving that the hunters had found a way to shape the rhythm of the sea. The early hunts had shown the world that Germany's submarines were not merely experimental tools, but decisive instruments of war. From lonely patrols to the beginnings of coordinated packs, the U-boat force was evolving with each voyage. The myth of the wolf pack spread quickly, a symbol of unseen danger and relentless pursuit. Sailors on both sides began to whisper of the ocean as a place of shadows where silence could hide death. And though the wolf had only begun to prowl, its presence was already reshaping the war at sea. The hunts were early, yet their echoes promised much more to come. And with that promise, the story flows into the next chapter of the Atlantic struggle. The vast Atlantic had revealed a new kind of challenge, one that demanded more than solitary hunting. Early patrols had shown the effectiveness of individual U-boats, yet commanders quickly realized that numbers could multiply success beyond what a single vessel could achieve. From these observations emerged the Wolfpack Doctrine, a tactical innovation designed to bring multiple submarines together against a single convoy. The idea was elegant in its simplicity: shadow, communicate, and converge, creating a silent ring around prey that could be tightened without warning. German commanders studied the seas, plotting patrol lines that would maximize coverage while remaining undetected. Radio messages carried coordinates, brief and precise, guiding fellow boats toward the target. Darkness became an ally, masking the slow approach of the boats as they slipped into position. The ocean, ever vast and patient, became a stage for careful, deliberate choreography. Each boat had its role, each crew its duty, and together they would become a force far larger than the sum of its parts. And so the hunt grew not only in ambition, but in quiet coordination. The execution of the wolf pack required meticulous timing and discipline. Submarines spread out across hundreds of miles, maintaining contact with distant companions through coded radio signals. Patience was critical, for a single miscalculation could alert the convoy and scatter its prey. Boats moved under the cover of night, engines quieted to battery power, periscopes barely piercing the dark surface. Captains studied charts and logs, noting currents, weather, and visibility, adjusting their approach with care. Even small mistakes carried weight, for the margin of error in ocean warfare is razor thin. Crews learned to sense the rhythms of the sea, to anticipate how a convoy might move, and how their own shadows could remain unseen. The silent coordination of the fleet resembled a slow, deliberate dance, each movement measured and purposeful, and as each U-boat settled into position, the sense of anticipation grew, subtle yet persistent. From this discipline came the first glimmers of a power that would come to define the U-boat arm. Allied merchant vessels and their escorts soon became aware of the growing menace, though not fully of its scale or coordination. Reports of simultaneous attacks from multiple submarines raised concern, even disbelief among naval officers. Convoys found themselves surrounded by unseen eyes, their defenses spread thin as the sea itself seemed to conspire against them. Escorts were reassigned, aerial patrols increased, yet the wolves found ways to exploit gaps and weaknesses. The psychological effect was as real as the material one, for sailors never knew if the next shadow would appear moments away or remain hidden for days. Every whistle of wind and roll of waves carried tension, a reminder that the ocean now held both life and threat. For those on the surface, the Atlantic had transformed from a corridor of commerce to a theater of suspense. The distant presence of the wolf pack shaped every decision from course to speed, to lookout patterns. And in this tension the skill of German commanders became clearer, their daring measured in both calculation and nerve. From strategy to execution, the ocean itself seemed to bend to their will. The composition of a wolf pack was flexible, changing with opportunity and necessity. Boats would join together for a single attack, then disperse to resume patrol lines elsewhere. Commanders communicated with headquarters to coordinate these movements, yet much depended on trust in the crews and their ability to act independently. Within each submarine, men prepared for their role with quiet focus, knowing that timing and stealth were paramount. Hours passed in watch rotations, with silence broken only by the hum of machinery or the distant report of other vessels. Navigators calculated positions, captains planned angles of approach, and lookouts trained their eyes across rolling horizons. Sleep came in fragments. Meals were hurried, yet concentration remained steady. Every boat in the pack had to maintain its position without alerting the target, a delicate balance between action and restraint. And in these hours, the ocean carried the unfolding strategy as effortlessly as it carried the boats themselves. The dance of hunters was underway, unseen and precise. The human experience of the wolf pack was a mixture of tension and strange calm. Men grew attuned to the subtle vibrations of their vessel, the soft lapping of waves against the hull, the muffled thrum of engines under battery. Each movement within the boat was purposeful, every command brief yet complete, as though the crew had become an extension of the machine. Conversations were whispered, laughter rare, and every moment of distraction was measured against potential danger. For some, the excitement of strategy and control mingled with the quiet apprehension of waiting, producing a strange hypnotic rhythm. Even in the closest moments to potential engagement, the sea seemed to cradle the boat, offering both concealment and challenge. They became part of the ocean's cadence, moving with its tides, listening to its sighs, and respecting its depth. The bond between man and vessel deepened, for survival depended on absolute harmony. In this stillness, anticipation grew, carrying the promise of power and the weight of responsibility. And as night carried the pack forward, the Atlantic became a vast theater of silent preparation. The first coordinated wolf pack attacks demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach with startling clarity. Convoys that had once moved freely across the Atlantic now found themselves shadowed and circled by multiple submarines. Even well-armed escorts could struggle to respond, as attacks came in waves and vanished as silently as they appeared. Commanders learned to strike from different angles, to rotate targets, and to coordinate torpedo spreads with careful timing. The ocean's vastness became an ally and a stage, offering cover for movement and opportunities for surprise. For the crews, the thrill of successful engagement was tempered by discipline and quiet reflection, for every success carried the responsibility of precision and care. Radio operators relayed coded updates, officers refined tactics, and the patterns of movement became increasingly sophisticated. What began as theory had evolved into practice, a living, breathing system of oceanic strategy. And with every patrol, the Wolfpack's shadow stretched further across the Atlantic. Its presence was subtle yet undeniable. Allied responses evolved slowly, adjusting to the rhythm of the Wolfpack. Convoys grew larger, escorts more vigilant, and new tactics emerged to counter the hidden threat. Yet for every countermeasure, the U-boats adapted, shifting patrol lines, changing attack angles, and exploiting gaps in observation. The ocean remained impartial, indifferent to either side, but it magnified the skill of those who understood it. Sailors on both sides became more attuned to its moods, noticing subtle currents, the shimmer of the surface, or the faint outline of a periscope. The dynamic between hunter and hunted developed into a quiet tension that stretched across miles of water. Each movement carried significance. Each decision shaped outcomes beyond immediate perception. The Wolfpack was not simply a tactical innovation, but a psychological presence that altered behavior far from its own location. And the Atlantic, once familiar and vast, became a stage for patience, precision, and the unfolding art of coordinated pursuit. The Doctrine had become reality, and the rhythm of the hunt was established. By the end of these early operations, the Wolfpack had proved itself more than an idea. It had become a method, a presence, and a legend. German commanders felt the confidence of their innovation, knowing they had crafted a way to multiply the reach of a single boat across oceans. Crews gained experience, discipline, and trust in both their vessel and their companions in other submarines. The seas carried them, indifferent yet faithful, to the physics and patterns that guided each approach. Merchant sailors and escorts began to speak in hushed tones of unseen forces, of shadows that appeared without warning. The myth of the Wolfpack intertwined with its reality, each feeding the other in quiet, subtle ways. The Atlantic, long a lifeline for trade and travel, now pulsed with danger, unseen yet persistent. And in the calm before each engagement, anticipation and patience ruled as the Wolfpack honed its presence in the dark. Each boat, each crew, each wave contributed to a larger design, an unfolding pattern across the deep. And so the story moves forward, toward greater hunts and deeper shadows beneath the waves. By 1940, the Atlantic had become a stage for the Type VII, and the Wolfpack had reached its first apex. Convoys once confident now traveled with careful calculations, their movements shaped by fear and experience. German U-boat commanders, confident in their craft and coordination, struck repeatedly, their attacks precise and methodical. Reports of tonnage sunk filled command rooms, numbers that told of influence spreading across oceans invisible to those on shore. Each boat, each patrol, each coordinated strike added to the growing reputation of the Type VII. Sailors at home listened to news and radio broadcasts, hearing stories of daring and skill that made the submarine crews folk heroes in their own right. Songs and poems emerged, celebrating the quiet determination of men who navigated dark waters to shape events far from sight. The ocean, vast and indifferent, seemed to bend slightly beneath the collective weight of this newfound power. And for the crews aboard the submarines, pride mingled with the quiet awareness of responsibility and endurance. The Atlantic had become both proving ground and theatre, carrying the echoes of these first great victories forward. The success of these operations was rooted in both design and doctrine. The Type VII's balance of speed, endurance, and stealth allowed it to strike repeatedly, while the Wolfpack coordinated its movements across hundreds of miles. Convoys that attempted to evade the submarines found themselves ensnared, surrounded by shadowy shapes moving without sound. Commanders learned to read the subtle signs of wind, wave, and light, placing their boats where the sea itself would conceal them. Every torpedo fired was preceded by careful calculation, and every approach was measured to minimize exposure. Crews, trained in the quiet discipline of life below the waves, executed these maneuvers with a calm efficiency. Victory was seldom celebrated loudly at sea, for the act of hunting demanded restraint, but each successful return to port was quietly acknowledged. Letters sent home carried the weight of pride, yet rarely the full story of the ocean's long, dark hours. And in the interplay of skill and design, the Type VII became a near-mythical presence across the Atlantic. Its shadow stretched far, unseen but undeniable. The human dimension of these victories was ever present, a counterpoint to the mechanical perfection of the boats themselves. Crew members slept in narrow bunks, their rest fragmented, yet hearts buoyed by the sense of accomplishment. Meals were shared quickly, conversation soft, eyes alert, even in moments of calm. Each patrol left traces on their bodies and minds, a quiet knowledge of distance traveled, weather endured, and machines mastered. The bond between men and vessel deepened, as did the bond among crew, a brotherhood forged by shared pressure and patient coordination. They learned to trust both the steel around them and the men beside them, a reliance that carried them through days of uncertainty. The rhythm of work, watch, and preparation became soothing in its constancy, even amid the tension of potential engagement. Each return from patrol brought relief and reflection, a chance to prepare again for the next journey. And in these cycles, the story of victory was written not only in sinking tonnage, but in endurance, skill, and quiet pride. The sea became a companion, carrying men and machines forward together. Meanwhile, news of success traveled to those awaiting word at home. Families, friends, and neighbors heard tales of skill, courage, and the growing effectiveness of the submarine arm. Propaganda embraced these stories, highlighting the ingenuity of German engineering and the courage of crews who navigated the shadowy seas. Songs were sung quietly at first in homes and pubs, celebrating the wolves of the Atlantic and their daring exploits. Folk tales took shape around individual boats and commanders, their names whispered with admiration and sometimes awe. Children grew up hearing of distant waters and unseen battles, their imaginations filled with dark hulls cutting through the waves. Newspapers and radio broadcasts repeated the accounts, emphasizing precision, discipline, and the quiet inevitability of these attacks. The ocean itself, though indifferent, seemed to carry these stories back and forth, connecting home and distant patrol. And in this interplay of myth and reality, the Type VII's reputation reached its height, a blend of fact and legend. It became not just a tool of war, but a symbol of human endeavor and machine mastery. The Wolfpack Doctrine continued to refine itself during this period, turning isolated successes into sustained campaigns. Patrol lines expanded, messages relayed with ever more precision, and coordination sharpened to a fine rhythm. Convoys were watched, shadowed, and encircled, each movement measured and deliberate. Captains relied on experience, reading currents, wind, and cloud, to place their boats where the ocean itself provided concealment. Subtle adjustments in depth and course were made to evade detection while remaining in position for attacks. Radio messages, brief and encoded, guided others to the gathering point without revealing their presence. The ocean carried these signals silently, indifferent yet obedient to physics and pattern. And as boats moved like ghosts across the waves, the myth of the Wolfpack deepened. Each night brought the quiet possibility of success, and each day confirmed the effectiveness of this new way of hunting. The Atlantic had become a place of anticipation, where skill and patience intertwined. The psychological rhythm of these peak operations was profound. Men grew attuned to the patterns of the sea, listening for faint noises, feeling the subtle pressures of the hull, sensing the currents beneath them. Silence became as important as action, and patience as valuable as daring. Even when strikes were successful, crews did not celebrate loudly, for caution was a constant companion. Letters home carried excitement, but often tempered by modesty and discretion. Conversations on deck were rare, whispered, respectful of the quietude of the ocean around them. Sleep, brief and fragmented, was punctuated by watches, drills, and quiet observation. Each patrol reinforced discipline and trust, the two pillars that allowed victory to continue. And through this steady rhythm, the wolf pack honed its identity, blending human endurance and mechanical precision. It became a force both real and mythic, its presence felt across thousands of miles of water. Across Europe, the symbolic resonance of these victories grew stronger. Songs of crews returned home with melodies of admiration, often sung softly in homes and taverns, carrying pride without overt triumphalism. Newspapers printed figures and maps, showing tonnage sunk and convoys disrupted, but leaving much to the imagination. The public understood that distant waters were being shaped by men in steel vessels, moving unseen, guided by skill and calculation. The fame of certain boats and commanders spread quietly, their names uttered with respect rather than boastfulness. Folk tales intertwined with factual reports, creating a narrative that combined human courage and technological mastery. Even as the war's scope expanded, the period of early dominance remained a peak remembered for its quiet drama. The Atlantic carried the echoes of these victories, as waves rolled across the vast distances connecting shore and patrol. And from this peak, the story would soon shift, as new challenges emerged to test both men and machines. The rhythm of the hunt was now established, but the ocean had more lessons to impart. By the close of 1941, the Type VII had become a defining presence in the Atlantic. Crews returned to port seasoned by experience, their confidence shaped by the successes of months at sea. Commanders in Berlin and Kiel reviewed reports with satisfaction, noting that strategy, design, and execution had aligned in remarkable harmony. The wolf pack, once a theory, now operated as a living network, its movements choreographed with precision and patience. Sailors, families, and citizens alike absorbed the stories of the sea, of skillful crews and efficient vessels, of distant victories that rippled into home life. Songs and anecdotes preserved these moments, soft melodies, carrying pride and remembrance across towns and harbors. The Type VII, small yet formidable, had proven itself capable of shaping the rhythm of conflict across oceans, and in the calm after each patrol, the men aboard returned to routine, their hearts buoyed by achievement, yet attuned to the demands still ahead. The peak had arrived, and the wolf prowled, quiet, patient, and at the height of its power. And as the Atlantic held its breath, the next chapter of challenge waited just beyond the horizon. Beneath the waves, life on a Type VII U-boat was defined by its rhythm, slow yet relentless, shaped by the constant presence of steel and water. The hull enclosed a world of narrow corridors and low ceilings, where every movement was careful and deliberate. Diesel fumes mingled with the scent of sea and oil, creating a distinct aroma that became both familiar and inescapable. Bunks were shared in close quarters, stacked above one another, like tiers of a fragile theatre, offering rest in short intervals. Watches rotated with precise timing, each man knowing when he must be alert, and when he could let fatigue take a brief hold. Conversations were soft, often whispered, blending into the hum of machinery and the distant murmur of the ocean against the hull. The rhythm of life below was marked by routines, meals, maintenance, drills, and observation, punctuated by moments of quiet reflection. Each man carried a personal anchor, a photograph, a letter, or a small token that connected him to life above the waves. The sea seemed patient, observing the rhythms of human endurance with indifferent constancy, and in that steady cadence, a subtle intimacy formed between men and their vessel, a quiet partnership against isolation. The work aboard a submarine was precise, demanding both skill and constant attention. Engines required care, batteries needed monitoring, and torpedo systems demanded exact handling, each element intertwined with the others. Crews learned to move in harmony, their actions coordinated by experience and necessity. Even small mistakes could ripple through the tight space, so every task was performed with concentration and calm. Men developed an almost tactile sense of their environment, sensing the boat's pitch, the vibration of engines, and the soft pressure of water against the hull. Rest periods were brief and taken in shifts, allowing some men to sleep, while others kept watch. Meals were modest, often eaten in near silence, with the smell of cooking mingling with the ever-present tang of diesel. Tasks could feel repetitive, yet repetition brought mastery and the comfort of predictability. In this close-knit world, human bonds grew strong, strengthened by necessity and shared endurance, and through it all, the men learned to coexist with both the machine and the sea. Sleep aboard the Type VII was a fragile luxury, often measured in hours rather than complete nights. Bunks were narrow, shared and padded only lightly, forcing the body to adapt to limited space. The sounds of the boat, pumps, engines, and water formed a constant lullaby, both soothing and inescapable. Men learned to rest in fragments, awakening quickly when a shift or alarm required action. Dreams often mingled with the motion of the sea, blurring the line between rest and the movement around them. Some sailors found comfort in the routine, letting the rhythm of the engines and the gentle sway of the boat lull them into a temporary calm. Others clung to personal rituals, adjusting gear, reading letters, or tracing the familiar curves of machinery before sleep. Even amid fatigue, awareness never completely faded, a quiet tension threading through every rest period. And in these brief respites, the mind reconciled the vastness of the ocean with the intimacy of the submarine. Sleep, like life on the boat, became an exercise in balance. Meals were both sustenance and small moments of connection, taken quickly yet shared among the crew. The galley was compact, its warmth mingling with the metallic scent of the hull and the persistent aroma of diesel. Food was often simple, preserved or prepared in ways that allowed it to endure long patrols, yet it carried comfort and familiarity. Conversation was soft, with laughter rare but treasured, providing brief relief from the tight quarters and constant responsibilities. Men ate in shifts, the rhythm of consumption blending seamlessly with watches and duties. Water was rationed and fresh produce rare, reminding all of the constraints of life beneath the waves. Even mundane tasks, cutting bread, pouring tea, washing dishes, became rituals that anchored the crew in routine. The sense of shared endurance strengthened bonds, fostering a quiet camaraderie essential for life under pressure. And as meals ended and duties resumed, the boat hummed on, a small world moving beneath a vast, indifferent ocean. The simple act of eating became a reminder of home and humanity. The Type VII demanded attentiveness at every turn, its systems requiring constant care to ensure safety and effectiveness. The diesel engines, batteries, and torpedo mechanisms were intertwined, each reliant on precise operation by trained hands. Crew members moved with deliberate economy, aware that errors in judgment could have immediate consequences. Maintenance was continuous, a slow, patient rhythm of oiling, checking, and adjusting. Men learned to anticipate the subtle changes in the boat's behavior, the slight vibrations that hinted at mechanical shifts or external forces. Even minor leaks or unusual sounds were treated with attention, addressed quickly to prevent accumulation. Knowledge of the vessel became instinctive, with each sailor internalizing the relationships between dials, valves, and the hull itself. Through constant care and observation, the machine became an extension of the crew, responding to their touch and attention, and in this partnership, life beneath the waves acquired a sense of quiet mastery, a rhythm of harmony between man and steel. The boat, like its crew, breathed in unison with the ocean. Moments of quiet reflection often punctuated the long stretches beneath the surface. Men gazed through periscopes when allowed, studying the rolling horizon or distant cloud formations. Some wrote letters, others traced maps, imagining the cities, forests, and rivers far above. The contrast between the confined, humid corridors of the boat and the endless sky above was ever present in thought and memory. Conversations, when they occurred, ranged from mundane observations to philosophical musings, a blending of humor, longing, and speculation. The smell of salt air brought comfort during brief surface runs, while the dim humming interior reminded them of their isolation. Time was measured differently below, marked by shifts, watches, and mechanical cycles rather than sunrises and sunsets. Each day reinforced patience, endurance, and the quiet bonds formed among men living in close proximity. And through these small rituals and reflections, the submarine became more than a vessel. It became a shared home and a sanctuary of endurance. Life beneath the waves was a delicate balance of duty and humanity. The small pleasures of life aboard carried disproportionate weight. A hot cup of coffee, a freshly laundered uniform, a letter from home, all offered moments of comfort and connection. Music, when someone played a harmonica or sang softly, echoed through narrow corridors, blending with the metallic resonance of the hull. Laughter was treasured, brief but bright, and often arose in whispers so as not to disturb ongoing duties. Men took care of one another in small ways, adjusting gear, sharing advice, or assisting with minor repairs. These acts reinforced a sense of community, a quiet resilience that became essential for life beneath the waves. Even in the monotony of repeated patrols, these details kept morale tethered to the human experience. The vessel itself, ever constant and silent, carried them through the vast, unpredictable ocean, and in these shared, understated comforts, life below the surface found its own rhythm and poetry. Each day became a testament to adaptation, endurance, and quiet persistence. Yet beneath the calm, the sea remained a constant presence, reminding all aboard of its scale and indifference. The hull pressed against water in subtle ways, waves whispered against steel, and the hum of currents provided a steady backdrop to every activity. Even when danger was absent, the ocean demanded respect, its moods shaping decisions and movements aboard. Men grew attuned to its language, sensing subtle changes in pressure, temperature, and motion. They learned patience, observation, and restraint. As the boat was powerless without careful guidance, awareness extended to every corner of the vessel, from engines to torpedo tubes, ensuring readiness at all times. The interplay of human skill and natural forces became a quiet meditation, a slow rhythm shared between crew and sea. And as patrols continued, the submarine became a microcosm, a world governed by its own rules within the vastness of the Atlantic. Life beneath the waves was challenging yet intimate, harsh yet profoundly human, and with that understanding, men and machine moved together in quiet harmony. By mid-1942, the Atlantic had shifted beneath the waves, subtle yet undeniable. The Allies had begun to refine their detection methods, employing radar, sonar, and the persistent sweep of aircraft across shipping lanes. What had once been quiet dominance by the Type VII now met the growing awareness of attentive eyes above and below. Crews who had moved with confidence began to feel the weight of possibility, the knowledge that unseen threats could appear suddenly. Submarines, once predators in solitude, now sensed themselves as part of a larger watchful sea. Orders came to dive at the first hint of detection, and the ocean became a layered stage of concealment and observation. The hum of machinery was punctuated by the distant thrum of anti-submarine efforts, subtle yet persistent. Each patrol carried a new tension, a quiet awareness that patience alone could no longer guarantee safety. And in these conditions the Atlantic seemed to watch and respond, shaping movements and decisions with quiet authority. The hunters had become aware that they might be hunted in return. Depth charges emerged as the new language of danger, falling from above with a rhythmic unpredictability. Crews learned the signs, faint vibrations through the hull, changes in pressure, and the distant echoes carried by sonar. Each signal prompted careful assessment and swift action, for the margin between safety and disaster was slim. Submarines dove deeper, adjusted ballast, and moved silently, following protocols developed through experience and necessity. The physical sensations were subtle yet disorienting. The quiet pressure of water at depth, the shudder of engines under strain, and the muted thrum of distant explosions. Men became attuned to the smallest variations, reading the ocean as a map of both threat and shelter. Even as fear threaded its way through minds, discipline remained paramount, guiding movement and response. Sleep became fragmented, meals hurried, and conversations whispered, all shaped by anticipation. Yet in this tension, a different kind of rhythm emerged, slow and steady, governed by caution and observation. And through it all, the men learned to respect the balance of predator and prey beneath the waves. The introduction of long-range aircraft added an unexpected dimension to the struggle. From high above, planes could spot shadows or wakes that betrayed the presence of a U-boat, sending ripples of unease through distant crews. Radar sweeps cut through night and fog, detecting hulls that had previously gone unnoticed. Each patrol required constant vigilance, not only against surface ships, but from the unseen eyes of the sky. Crews adjusted routines, surfacing only when absolutely necessary, conserving batteries and timing movements to minimize exposure. The ocean's vastness remained, yet no longer offered complete concealment. It became a stage shared with vigilant observers. Men spoke softly of what they sensed but could not see, describing the faint hums, shadows, and vibrations that hinted at observation. Even in routine patrols, the tension threaded through the boat, a quiet companion to every action. The Atlantic, once a domain of stealth and independence, now demanded respect for unseen forces above and around. And so the rhythm of hunting intertwined with the rhythm of evasion. Subtle dread became part of daily life aboard the Type VII. Men adjusted to the knowledge that each mission carried potential danger beyond their immediate perception. Depth charges, aerial patrols, and escort vessels all contributed to a constant undercurrent of anxiety, measured in vibrations, noises, and the occasional distant report. Each shift at the periscope or listening station became a meditation in observation and restraint. Training and discipline helped, yet the mind could not fully escape the ocean's persistent tension. Letters from home were treasured, offering connection and a reminder of the world above the waves. Small rituals, cleaning, checking torpedoes, and maintaining equipment became both habit and coping mechanism. Even humor, shared quietly among men, took on a softer tone, laced with awareness of fragility. The boat became a cocoon of both endurance and vulnerability, moving with purpose through the indifferent Atlantic, and within this confined moving world, quiet resilience grew, shaped by both skill and patience. Communication became a delicate dance, balancing the need to coordinate with the risk of interception. Radio messages were brief, coded, and sent with careful timing, each transmission a potential beacon to distant adversaries. The network of wolf packs remained, yet each message carried the quiet risk of revealing location or intent. Captains had to weigh necessity against exposure, often delaying or abbreviating reports to preserve safety. The tension of waiting for responses, of interpreting distant signals, added a mental weight alongside the physical strain of operations. Men grew adept at interpreting silence as much as words, reading subtle changes in routines and radio signals. Each patrol became a study in timing, observation, and restraint. A slow choreography dictated by the interplay of ocean, technology, and human judgment. The Atlantic carried their efforts, indifferent but influential, shaping outcomes through currents, weather, and concealment. And in this delicate balance, the hunters learned humility, aware of the shifting scales between advantage and vulnerability. Each decision became part of a quiet, ongoing meditation beneath the waves. The psychological effects were as subtle as the movements of the sea. Anxiety and anticipation intertwined, shaping thought, sleep, and conversation. Men spoke in measured tones, laughter subdued, each aware of the invisible pressures around them. The once proud confidence of early victories now mingled with a soft vigilance, a heightened awareness of risk. Every shift and maneuver carried the echo of lessons learned from patrols past, each mistake studied quietly to prevent repetition. The boat became both refuge and confinement, a small world of steel beneath a vast, indifferent ocean. Human bonds deepened further, sustained by shared endurance and mutual reliance. Trust in the vessel, the crew, and the silent rhythms of the sea became central to survival and composure. And through this subtle psychological landscape, life beneath the waves continued, measured, cautious, and profoundly human. As the hunter became the hunted, tactics evolved again in response. Submarines altered depth, course, and timing, seeking patterns in the movement of enemies above. The ocean itself became a partner in evasion, currents, and thermoclines used to conceal and protect. Men adapted to the new rhythm, learning to anticipate both the predictable and the random, adjusting both strategy and mindset. The wolf pack's coordination persisted, but now under the shadow of heightened risk, demanding even more skill and patience. Each engagement became an exercise in observation, calculation, and quiet daring, tempered by the lessons of vulnerability. The Atlantic's vastness offered both sanctuary and exposure, shaping the dance of hunter and hunted. Even in retreat or avoidance, the boats moved with purpose, their presence felt without being seen. And as each patrol ended, reflection followed, reinforcing both caution and resolve for the journeys yet ahead. By the end of this period, the dynamic of the Atlantic had shifted unmistakably. The U-boats remained a formidable force, yet their supremacy was no longer assured. Awareness of enemy detection, the threat of depth charges, and the vigilance of aircraft had introduced a quiet tension into every patrol. Crews adapted, learned, and persevered, yet the sense of vulnerability was inescapable. The Atlantic had become a landscape of subtle, persistent danger, shaping strategy and psychology alike. Even amid success, patience and care governed every movement, a slow, hypnotic rhythm of endurance. The hunters now measured every breath, every rotation, every action against potential unseen threats, and in this delicate balance of skill and caution, the story of the Type VII continued, carrying with it both triumph and uncertainty. The next chapter awaited, as shadows deepened and challenges grew. As the war moved deeper into 1942, the Atlantic seemed to constrict around the Type VII U-boats, shrinking the spaces in which they could move unseen. Allied convoys had grown larger and more organized, their escort groups more numerous and vigilant. The so-called Black Pit became a notorious stretch of open water, where air coverage was intermittent and danger ever present. Every patrol now carried a sense of uncertainty, a quiet gamble with every dive and surfacing. The ocean, once a vast theater of possibility, now felt narrower, its currents and winds shaped by the rhythms of both hunter and hunted. Crews adjusted to this new reality, moving with greater caution, reading patterns of patrols and aircraft with careful attention. Even small changes in weather or visibility could determine the success or failure of an operation. Silence and stillness became a companion, guiding both thought and action beneath the waves. The Atlantic was no longer only a conduit of commerce and conquest. It had become a landscape of suspense and strategy, and in this tightening expanse, the men and their vessels learned new measures of patience. The presence of air patrols above the Black Pit forced submarines to adapt in subtle ways, surfacing for fresh air, necessary to recharge batteries, now carried significant risk, and crews learned to move swiftly and quietly. The hum of engines, once a comforting reminder of control, now blended with the unseen patterns of enemy observation. Men became attuned to the sky, noting clouds, sunlight, and the distant hum of aircraft engines, all as cues for timing and safety. Even brief exposure above water required coordination, trust, and calm, as every movement had consequence. Subtle shadows on the waves, the flicker of sunlight on metal, or the distant outline of clouds could signal danger before it fully arrived. The ocean carried these signals silently, demanding both observation and patience. Each patrol became a balance between action and restraint, a slow dance measured by instinct and calculation, and through this tension, the rhythm of life beneath the waves continued, quiet yet charged with meaning. The Atlantic seemed to narrow with every mile, shaping the thoughts and decisions of those aboard. Convoy formations had become increasingly sophisticated, their escort groups moving with deliberate precision. Destroyers, corvettes, and smaller vessels created layers of detection, a network of presence that spread across miles of water. Radar and sonar provided new senses for those above, expanding their reach and awareness. The Type VII, agile and stealthy, had to contend with this growing web of surveillance, navigating between threats and opportunities. Each patrol required planning, observation, and sometimes a willingness to delay action in favor of safety. Men studied charts and currents, estimating positions and anticipating patterns with a practiced eye. Even in quiet stretches of ocean, attention never wavered, for the Atlantic now carried vigilance in every wave and wind shift. Subtle changes in speed, course, or depth could make the difference between success and detection. The narrowing expanse of opportunity reinforced the quiet discipline aboard each boat, and the ocean, vast yet increasingly monitored, demanded both respect and strategy from its visitors. The psychological tension grew with every patrol through these constrained waters. Men moved with heightened awareness, attuned to vibrations in the hull and the faintest changes in pressure. Silence became both a tool and a measure of patience. As conversations were reduced to necessary communication, sleep was carefully timed, often brief and punctuated by the need for readiness. The smells and sensations of the boat, diesel, metal, the faint tang of salt water, took on greater significance. Anchoring men in the reality of their confined world, even the simplest tasks, maintenance and observation, carried the weight of potential consequence. Crews developed a rhythm of quiet endurance, balancing the demands of vigilance with the need for rest and sustenance. Each patrol reinforced both skill and caution, shaping experience in subtle but lasting ways. And in this careful balance, the Atlantic imposed its own lessons, refining both crew and vessel alike. The narrowing sea became a teacher, patient yet insistent. Communication remained a delicate and vital element of life beneath the waves. Radio transmissions were brief, coded, and carefully timed, balancing coordination with the risk of interception. Messages guided wolf packs to their objectives while minimizing exposure, threading across the Atlantic with precision. Captains relied on the experience and judgment of their counterparts, trusting that each boat understood the unspoken rhythms of movement and threat. Silence often spoke as loudly as words, with crews interpreting pauses, gaps, and subtle cues from command. The ocean carried both instruction and caution, shaping patterns of travel and action in ways unseen. Even minor adjustments in patrol lines could have significant consequences, demanding careful calculation and patience. Each decision resonated, threading together the lives and safety of men across miles of water. And in this interconnected web, the Atlantic narrowed yet again, shaping behavior and strategy with quiet insistence. The tension of uncertainty became a constant companion on every patrol. The Black Pit imposed a physical and mental pressure on all who traversed it. Days passed with careful observation, nights filled with anticipation, each hour measured by the slow rhythm of machinery and ocean. Crew members grew attuned to currents, thermoclines, and the subtle patterns of waves, using knowledge of the sea as both guide and shield. Even small details, a ripple, a shadow, a distant sound, carried significance, prompting careful assessment and adjustment. The confined space of the Type VII amplified both awareness and reflection, reinforcing patience, endurance, and observation. Meals, chores, and rest were framed by vigilance, with every routine shaped by the surrounding uncertainty. Bonds between men deepened, strengthened by the shared experience of calculated risk and persistent tension. The ocean, immense and indifferent, seemed both friend and adversary, offering concealment while demanding respect. And as patrols pressed through this narrow expanse, the crew moved with quiet harmony, a blend of caution and skill. The Atlantic had become a measured, demanding partner in their journeys. Adaptation became central to survival and effectiveness. Crews adjusted depth, timing, and positioning in response to evolving threats, using knowledge of both ocean and enemy to navigate the narrow corridors of patrol. Subtle shifts in currents or temperature layers were interpreted as guides, providing opportunities for concealment and evasion. Observation and anticipation were practiced continuously, each man attuned to the quiet movements of both boat and sea. Even minor errors could alter the outcome of a patrol, reinforcing the need for discipline and attention. The interplay of natural conditions, mechanical systems, and human judgment shaped every decision aboard. Men developed a steady, reflective pace, balancing anticipation with patience, movement with stillness. The narrowing Atlantic demanded this awareness, imposing constraints that shaped skill, endurance, and instinct. And through these quiet adaptations, the Type VII continued to traverse the ocean, navigating risk with careful calculation. Each patrol became both a test and a meditation beneath the waves. By the close of this period, the Atlantic had become a land of narrow opportunity and persistent vigilance. The Type VII remained agile, resilient, and capable, yet the environment had changed profoundly. Convoys and escorts, air patrols and detection technology had compressed the spaces in which these submarines could operate freely. Crews moved with deliberate attention, guided by both experience and caution, their actions threaded with uncertainty and hope. The Black Pit represented the convergence of ocean technology and human endurance, a place where risk and skill intertwined. Even as tension increased, quiet rhythm persisted, a testament to adaptation and patience beneath the waves. The narrowing Atlantic demanded both respect and ingenuity, shaping the unfolding story of the U-boat and its crew. And as each patrol ended, reflection followed, preparing men for the journeys yet ahead. The sea had become a teacher once more, patient, precise, and quietly insistent. Beneath the waves, the Atlantic became a stage of quiet tension, where predator and prey exchanged unseen glances and subtle maneuvers. The Type VII moved slowly, carefully, each rotation of its propellers measured to avoid detection. Convoys above were no longer simple targets. Their escort ships and aircraft listened, scanned, and responded to the faintest hint of a submarine's presence. The ocean itself carried these signals, transmitting vibrations and echoes across miles of water, perceptible only to those trained to notice. Each patrol became a game of patience and instinct, a delicate negotiation with physics, machinery, and human skill. Sound replaced sight, and perception depended on the smallest cues, the subtle hum of engines, the ripple of distant propellers, the occasional ping of sonar. Men listened, read, and waited, their awareness stretched thin over long hours of anticipation. Silence was both companion and adversary, providing cover while magnifying the sense of vulnerability. And in this quiet, the U-boat became less a machine and more an extension of the senses, responding instinctively to subtle changes in the surrounding water. The deep became a silent arena, vast, indifferent, yet charged with possibility. Each maneuver was executed with deliberate care, the margin for error narrow yet unforgiving. Captains adjusted depth, course, and speed, reading currents and echoes to remain concealed. Even minor shifts in ballast could change the way the boat interacted with the ocean, subtly altering its acoustic footprint. The crew, attuned to the vessel's movements, sensed these changes as if the boat itself were alive. Watches rotated in near silence, hands steady and eyes alert, listening to the hum of machinery and the soft vibrations of water. Every decision balanced opportunity with caution, each action informed by experience and intuition. The Atlantic seemed to carry a collective memory of every patrol, its waves and currents transmitting lessons silently through the deep. Crews relied on this sense of rhythm and knowledge, blending human awareness with mechanical precision. And in these silent duels, the ocean tested skill, patience, and endurance, shaping the story of each encounter. The dance between hunter and hunted was both intimate and vast. The periscope, when it emerged, offered only a fragment of the world above, a glimpse of convoys moving steadily through the waters. Even this small visual information was precious, guiding decisions and strategy with care. Men interpreted patterns in the movement of ships, anticipating actions based on experience and observation. The surrounding ocean amplified the quiet tension, carrying both potential threats and opportunities across unseen distances. radio transmissions, brief and coded, threaded commands and coordination through miles of water and air. Each message balanced necessity against the risk of exposure, a silent negotiation between action and restraint. The Type VII became a listening post, a participant in a dialogue of vibrations, echoes, and subtle pressures. Even the sound of men breathing, restrained and careful, became part of this intricate network of awareness. And in this carefully measured communication, the boat and crew moved as one, attuned to the hidden rhythms of the Atlantic. Each moment demanded attention, patience, and trust in both skill and instinct. The mental landscape aboard the U-boat reflected the silent tension outside. Men shifted between focus and reflection, measuring sound, motion, and light with unwavering attention. Anxiety was present but controlled, an undercurrent rather than a torrent, guiding careful behavior. Sleep came in fragments, stolen between shifts, while meals were taken quietly, a brief pause in the constant awareness of the surrounding ocean. The smell of diesel, metal, and salt water became both grounding and familiar, linking the men to their vessel and to the rhythm of life beneath the waves. Crew members communicated sparingly, sharing observations, warnings, or subtle reassurances. Even moments of quiet humor or camaraderie carried the weight of restraint, measured against the omnipresent possibility of detection. The Atlantic imposed a slow, hypnotic rhythm on thought and movement, shaping endurance and decision alike. And in this mental environment, patience became both strategy and refuge, a tool as essential as the vessel itself. The deep tested not only skill, but composure and presence of mind. Sound became the primary language of survival, guiding action through both perception and interpretation. Echoes of distant engines, the faint vibration of passing ships, and the hum of the boat itself formed a continuous symphony of information. Men learned to distinguish subtle differences, reading the ocean's acoustic signals as carefully as a map or chart. Even the silence between sounds carried meaning, suggesting distance, direction, or impending threat. Every maneuver required consideration, each choice weighed against the invisible forces around them. The Type VII's hull responded to these shifts, transmitting vibrations that informed those aboard in ways that became instinctive. Coordination between crew members relied on this shared awareness, a quiet choreography of listening, responding, and anticipating. And as patrols continued, each silent duel became a testament to both human skill and mechanical precision, a meditation on patience beneath the waves. The ocean held both the challenge and the rhythm, shaping every decision with subtle insistence. The deep was alive with sound and expectation. Even brief surfacing brought new layers of awareness and tension. Air and light above contrasted sharply with the confined vibrating world below, offering both relief and risk. Men breathed deeply, absorbing scents of salt and wind, while sensors and eyes scanned the horizon for distant threats. Routine checks and maintenance were performed quickly, yet methodically, each task guided by training and attentiveness. The contrast between the surface and the deep reinforced the delicate balance of each patrol, a reminder of vulnerability and resilience. Crew members shared quiet conversation, soft in tone, punctuated by the hum of machinery and distant water. Letters or small personal tokens were read or handled carefully, grounding the mind in human connection amid isolation. The Type VII moved between worlds with gentle deliberation, balancing the needs of operation, observation, and endurance. And in these moments, the ocean carried both reassurance and caution, shaping the rhythm of thought and action beneath the waves. The Atlantic remained a patient observer of every movement and choice. The choreography of these silent duels relied on both preparation and instinct. Crews anticipated enemy movements, interpreting subtle cues, and adjusting depth, speed, and course accordingly. Even minor adjustments could alter outcomes, revealing opportunity or danger in the vast expanse of water. Men observed, calculated, and responded with deliberate care, each action informed by experience, training, and instinctive understanding of the vessel. The Atlantic carried their intentions, blending natural and mechanical signals into a continuous flow of information. Trust in both boat and crew became essential, each relying on the other to navigate threats unseen. The rhythm of patrols evolved into a meditation, a slow, attentive flow of movement and awareness. And through this delicate balance, survival was achieved, not through force, but through skill, patience, and the quiet mastery of unseen spaces. The ocean tested the limits of perception and endurance alike. By the end of these encounters, the Type VII had demonstrated both capability and vulnerability in equal measure. The deep was a realm of quiet tension, where victories and retreats were measured in subtle maneuvers and restrained decisions. Crews grew ever more attuned to the whispers of the sea, interpreting vibrations and echoes with practiced care. The silent duels continued, each patrol a meditation in skill, patience, and endurance. The Atlantic, immense and indifferent, shaped the actions of men and machines alike, teaching lessons in subtlety and anticipation. Even as danger increased, the quiet rhythm of life beneath the waves persisted, grounding both thought and action. Coordination, observation, and patience became as vital as steel and machinery, an extension of human awareness. And through this intricate balance, the story of the Type VII continued, a blend of precision, reflection, and resilience. The ocean held its secrets, demanding attentiveness and offering reward only to those who listened. And in the deep, beneath waves and shadow, the silent duels carried on. The ocean, once a vast stage for the Type VII's quiet dominance, began to reveal its impartiality in ever sharper relief. Crews that had once moved with confidence now felt the weight of unseen forces as whole patrols vanished without explanation. Reports of lost boats traveled slowly, filtered through channels that emphasized procedure over emotion. Families at home received little more than silence, a quiet void that spoke louder than words. The myth of invincibility, nurtured by early triumphs and folk tales, began to erode under the pressure of reality. Even seasoned crews felt the subtle tension of anticipation, a persistent undercurrent of uncertainty. Letters and photographs, tokens of life above, became reminders of the fragility of each patrol. The Atlantic remained vast, but its vastness now carried stories of absence as well as presence. Every patrol became a meditation on risk and endurance, a careful balance of caution and necessity. And in this unfolding reckoning, the quiet rhythm of life beneath the waves was altered irreversibly. Losses were felt first as numbers, recorded in logs and dispatches, impersonal and precise. Yet each entry represented a life suspended in memory. Submarines that had once been counted among the fleet's strengths disappeared quietly, leaving only echoes of their presence in the waves. Crews listened and waited for signals that never arrived, the absence itself shaping the vessel's environment. The hum of machinery, once reassuring, now reminded men of vulnerability, of finite control, in a vast and indifferent ocean. Even in routine operations, the shadow of previous losses tempered action, lending gravity to decisions previously made with confidence. Letters from distant relatives arrived with normality, juxtaposing the danger that unfolded silently beneath the waves. Bonds among men deepened in response to shared awareness, tempered by a subtle understanding of mortality. And as the Atlantic carried its impartial judgment, the rhythm of patrols became slower, deliberate, weighted with reflection. Men adjusted not only tactics but mindset, recognizing the limits of endurance and the scope of chance. The ocean seemed to whisper lessons in quiet patience and cautious respect. Wolf packs, once symbols of coordinated dominance, now faced the consequences of concentrated attention by the Allies. Entire groups of submarines could be lost to detection and precision strikes, their coordination insufficient against evolving countermeasures. The ocean held these events in silence, leaving only empty coordinates and unanswered signals. Crews aboard remaining boats felt the absence as a tangible weight, a reminder of mortality in a world once defined by movement and strategy. Conversations, once light with camaraderie, grew measured, underscored by a quiet tension. Tasks were performed with meticulous care, each adjustment a small act of survival and reflection. The Type VII, though resilient, revealed limitations in both design and circumstance, emphasizing the balance between ambition and reality. Men learned to navigate not only currents and patrol lines, but the emotional landscape shaped by repeated loss. And in the quiet moments between watches, they reflected on the transience of both triumph and presence beneath the waves. The Atlantic had become a vessel of memory as much as of movement. Reports from command arrived with an impersonal cadence, emphasizing strategy and data over human consequence. Yet within these reports were stories of absence, loss, and the quiet dissolution of expectation. Each message carried weight beyond its words, shaping the perception of risk and the planning of future patrols. The men aboard responded with disciplined attention, interpreting gaps and signals with care, aware that each decision could determine survival. The smell of the boat, diesel and metal, mingled with salt, became a reminder of constancy amidst uncertainty. Even the hum of machinery, once steady and reassuring, now resonated with awareness of absence and impermanence. Sleep remained fragmented, punctuated by reflection and subtle vigilance, while meals were quiet, shared in mindful, measured intervals. Bonds between crew members were strengthened by reliance, necessity, and the recognition of shared fragility. And as days passed beneath the waves, each patrol became a slow meditation, a rhythm shaped by endurance, memory, and reflection. The Atlantic itself seemed to carry these lessons with soft insistence, ever patient and impartial. Losses brought reflection, as much as they brought caution, shaping the mood aboard every remaining Type VII. Men considered the men who had gone before, imagining their actions, choices, and quiet courage. Letters, photographs, and personal effects became talismans of presence, bridging distance and absence across both time and water. The hum of the ocean, once a companion, now also seemed a subtle witness to the impermanence of human endeavor. Even the simple act of moving through the boat, opening a hatch, adjusting ballast, walking a narrow corridor, was imbued with thoughtfulness. Crew members developed heightened awareness, not only of the vessel and the sea, but of the delicate patterns of life within their confined world. Communication was measured, deliberate, and attentive, each word carrying significance against the backdrop of uncertainty. And through this reflection, men found a rhythm quiet and restrained, balancing vigilance with endurance. The Atlantic, immense and unyielding, shaped not only movement but emotion and perception alike. Survival became both a physical and contemplative practice, intertwined with the echo of absence. The sense of vulnerability extended to every facet of life beneath the waves. Routine tasks carried weight beyond their function. Each check, adjustment, and maintenance action, informed by memory and caution. The hum of machinery, the vibration of the hull, and the faint creak of steel reminded men that the environment itself could be both ally and adversary. Even conversations were tempered, measured, and deliberate, emphasizing necessity over habit. Rest was fragmented, a fragile equilibrium between vigilance and the body's quiet demands. The smell of salt, oil, and diesel became familiar markers of constancy amidst loss. Meals, brief and subdued, offered moments of connection, even as each bite carried the awareness of uncertainty. And in this careful, deliberate rhythm, the Type VII became a space of both reflection and resilience. The Atlantic, vast and impartial, continued to shape the lives of those beneath its surface. Losses, though numerous, reinforced the delicate balance of endurance and caution. Letters from home, when they arrived, carried both comfort and contrast, bridging distance while emphasizing absence. Words of hope or inquiry were tempered by the silence of unanswered messages from those who had gone before. Men read, reread, and reflected, connecting to lives beyond the waves while maintaining attention to immediate duty. Even small tokens, photos, notes, or personal belongings were handled with care, grounding thought and emotion in tangible presence. Crew members relied on one another with quiet understanding, recognizing the shared weight of endurance and loss. The Type VII, compact and constrained, became a vessel of reflection as well as action, a space where life and absence coexisted in measured rhythm. Every shift, every maneuver, carried the lessons of those who had been lost, shaping decision and perception alike. And through this intertwining of reflection, vigilance, and ritual, the crew maintained both composure and connection. The Atlantic held these stories, vast, silent, and patient, allowing reflection to persist beneath the waves. Losses, though invisible to the world above, became etched into the vessel and its rhythm. By the end of this period, the Atlantic carried both the presence and absence of the Type VII with equal weight. Crews moved with deliberate care, tempered by the memory of vanished comrades and the knowledge of risk. The ocean, vast and impartial, witnessed the quiet endurance of those who remained, shaping rhythm, reflection, and action in subtle ways. Patrols continued, constrained by both awareness of danger and respect for the unpredictability of the sea. The myth of invincibility had faded, replaced by a quiet understanding of limits, mortality, and measured courage. The hum of machinery, the vibration of water, and the faint whisper of waves became companions to reflection and memory. Bonds between men were strengthened by shared endurance, reliance, and the recognition of fragility. And in this atmosphere, the Type VII continued to navigate the Atlantic, a vessel of steel, skill, and quiet resilience. The losses mounted, yet life beneath the waves persisted, shaped by reflection, patience, and subtle courage. And as the Atlantic stretched beyond the horizon, the story of these men and their vessel carried on, quietly and inexorably forward. Beneath the waves, Type VII captains moved with confidence born of training, experience, and a sense of the ocean's rhythm. Yet far from the Atlantic, in quiet rooms filled with the hum of machinery, another kind of battle unfolded. At Bletchley Park, codebreakers worked with focus and patience, untangling patterns woven into the seemingly unbreakable Enigma messages. Each keystroke, each cipher solved, revealed invisible threads that traced the movement of submarines before they had even dived. The ocean above was vast and indifferent, but the information flowing from these secret rooms shaped the fate of boats and crews in subtle, powerful ways. German captains, unaware, charted courses and made decisions that were already anticipated, their skill measured against a hidden, meticulous adversary. The air was quiet, punctuated only by the soft click of machines, a contrast to the distant roar of engines and surfacing submarines. Patience, calculation, and observation became weapons as potent as torpedoes or steel hulls, and as the Atlantic stretched out before them, the U-boats carried with them the weight of unseen knowledge and unseen eyes. The shadows of information moved silently alongside the waves. Every message intercepted, every code deciphered, created a network of foresight for the Allies. Convoys could be rerouted, escort groups repositioned, and U-boats maneuvered unknowingly into corridors of observation. Each success was invisible, leaving no trace of intervention yet, altering the flow of events across thousands of miles of water. Captains aboard the Type VII relied on instinct, experience, and training, unaware that the ocean itself was silently augmented with unseen intelligence. The rhythm of patrols, once dictated only by currents and enemy ships, now unfolded against a backdrop of hidden strategy. Men aboard noticed subtle changes in patterns, escorts where none had been expected, aircraft in unexpected positions, without knowing the full extent of planning that shaped these movements. The ocean carried these signals, blending natural and human factors into a continuous challenge, and through this quiet interplay, the Atlantic became a layered space, where skill, chance, and intelligence converged beneath the waves. Even in the smallest decisions, the influence of unseen calculation was present. The Type VII continued to move, a silent participant in a broader hidden choreography. The Enigma itself was a machine of complexity and precision, encoding messages in sequences that seemed impervious to understanding. Yet the human mind, paired with careful logic and emerging technology, began to unravel its secrets. Patterns emerged from apparent randomness, and what was once thought impossible became a map of opportunity for those who decoded it. Signals from Bletchley Park traveled invisibly, guiding actions above the waves in ways that remained concealed to the crews below. Every patrol, every dive, and every maneuver occurred under the quiet influence of this intelligence. Captains and crews operated with confidence, unaware that the ocean's expanse had been subtly constricted by information they could not perceive. Even routine operations were colored by this hidden presence, shaping movement, timing, and decision-making in silent ways. The interplay of knowledge and action created a tension both subtle and profound, shaping the Atlantic's rhythm for those above and below. And in this shadowed realm, the ocean carried both freedom and unseen constraint, a delicate balance that guided outcomes silently. Men aboard the Type VII moved with skill, their choices quietly intersecting with forces they could not imagine. The consequences of these codes were often subtle yet profound. Convoys seemed to appear at unexpected moments. Aircraft patrolled in patterns that defied prediction, and U-boats encountered threats before any visible sign had emerged. Crews adapted to these new challenges instinctively, reading changes in their environment with heightened awareness. Even minor anomalies, a distant sound, a shift in escort patterns, a ripple in the ocean became points of attention, interpreted as cues by those trained to survive. The Atlantic, once vast and forgiving in its expanse, now carried an invisible layer of strategy and anticipation. Men relied on training, judgment, and observation, each factor shaped by both experience and intuition. The hum of the boat, the vibration of water, and the faint echo of distant ships became information as valuable as any chart or compass. And through this constant interplay, the Atlantic became a subtle battleground of mind, skill, and perception. Each patrol was measured, deliberate, and quietly suspenseful. The ocean remained impartial, yet shaped by unseen hands and unspoken calculation. Life aboard the U-boat continued amid this invisible pressure, blending endurance with subtle observation. Meals were quiet, routines deliberate, and conversations measured, as men processed both immediate and distant uncertainties. Sleep was fragmented and shallow, yet each rest contributed to the alertness necessary for survival. Crew members became attuned not only to sound and movement, but also to patterns that might indicate the presence of unseen forces. Even the familiar smells of diesel, metal, and salt water took on added significance, grounding thought and focus in the present. Every rotation of machinery, every adjustment of ballast, became part of a delicate rhythm informed by experience and intuition. Men observed each other with quiet care, aware that endurance, coordination, and judgment were as crucial as training. And in this suspended, attentive life, the invisible threads of intelligence above were felt in ways that could not be named, yet shaped every action. The Atlantic carried all of this quietly, vast and patient, framing both freedom and constraint beneath the waves. Life moved in a measured cadence, influenced by forces both seen and unseen. Even when distant threats were avoided, the knowledge of intelligence shaped decisions and perception. Captains planned routes and timing, with careful attention to both enemy movement and the patterns that might emerge from unknown observation. The Type VII's speed, stealth, and maneuverability remained crucial, yet the invisible dimension of code breaking introduced a layer of tension and caution that could not be ignored. Crews relied on instinct honed through experience, balancing immediate observation with unspoken awareness of potential unseen factors. Communication became a tool of necessity. Each transmission weighed against both risk and reward. Subtle environmental cues, shadows, ripples, distant sounds, gained new significance as they were interpreted against a backdrop of possible intelligence. The Atlantic, vast and indifferent, carried these layers silently, shaping behavior without visible interference. And in this careful negotiation of skill, perception, and unseen influence, the U-boats continued their work, navigating both physical and informational currents. Each dive and surfacing carried added contemplation, reflecting both the ocean's challenges and the hidden reach of human ingenuity. The ocean's expanse seemed at once infinite and measured, bounded by knowledge unseen. The psychological rhythm aboard the boat adapted to this hidden dimension. Men moved with heightened awareness, interpreting minor changes in routine, sound, and light with careful thought. Anxiety persisted, quiet yet present, woven into the patterns of observation and decision-making. Bonds of trust were strengthened, as reliance on one another became central to survival and action. Even small tasks, from maintenance to navigation, were performed with careful deliberation, guided by both experience and anticipation. The Type VII became a space where patience and reflection were as essential as maneuverability or firepower. Men processed information silently, balancing attention to immediate threats with an intuitive understanding of the unseen dimension above. The ocean itself seemed to participate in this rhythm, carrying sound, movement, and consequence in a continuous measured flow. And through this intricate interplay, life beneath the waves continued with both caution and quiet persistence. The Atlantic was patient, vast, and filled with subtle instruction. By the close of this chapter, the interplay of sound, observation, and intelligence had begun to reshape the nature of the Atlantic War. Type VII U-boats, once predators of unparalleled confidence, now moved with an awareness that blended instinct, training, and the quiet influence of unseen knowledge. The ocean remained vast, indifferent, yet every action carried resonance within a hidden network of observation and calculation. Men adapted, learning to navigate not only currents and patrol lines, but the shadows of insight that preceded them. Every patrol became both a physical and contemplative exercise, a careful balance of skill, patience, and intuition. The Atlantic held its secrets and its lessons, vast yet subtly bounded, guiding movement, perception, and decision. The Type VII continued its journey, a vessel of steel, experience, and quiet endurance beneath the waves. And in the ocean's patient embrace, the silent war of codes and shadows unfolded, shaping outcomes before the first torpedo was fired. The Atlantic stretched endlessly, indifferent and vast, holding within its depths a quiet archive of human endeavor and loss. Beneath the waves, steel hulls rested in silence, remnants of men and machines once caught in the rhythm of war. Type VII U-boats, once symbols of confidence and control, now joined this submerged memory, their presence a testament to both skill and vulnerability. Currents carried whispers of past patrols, subtle movements tracing the contours of vanished vessels. The ocean, immense and patient, embraced them without distinction, neither condemning nor sparing. Even the smallest details, the angle of a periscope left in place, the bend of a hull, echoed stories of ambition, courage, and fragility. Crews above could only imagine, sensing absence where presence had once moved with certainty. Letters unread, voices unheard, and lives paused became part of the invisible rhythm beneath the waves. And in this vastness, every patrol seemed measured against an ocean that recorded triumph and failure alike. The sea held memory as gently as it held water, quiet, deep, and enduring. The notion of a graveyard grew subtly, spread across miles of undisturbed water. Ships that had once sailed with purpose rested quietly, now steel-cold and still coated by the slow embrace of salt and sediment. Currents carried particles of history, faint traces of fuel, paint, and metal, mingling with the natural rhythm of the sea. Crews who survived felt the presence of these silent companions, a humbling reminder of impermanence. Even the Type VII, engineered for precision and endurance, revealed limits against the ocean's patient expanse. Each dive, each patrol became a meditation on vulnerability, where skill and experience could guide but not guarantee safety. Communication, navigation, and observation were exercised with care, as every action was shadowed by unseen consequence. And in these reflections, men understood the sea as both teacher and witness, vast, impartial, and enduring. The Atlantic had become a space of quiet contemplation, where the boundaries of life and absence intersected. Steel and water intertwined, shaping stories beneath the waves with a gentle inevitability. The rhythm of the ocean contrasted sharply with the urgency of human life above its surface. Time beneath the waves moved differently, measured in currents, depth, and subtle vibration, rather than minutes or hours. U-boat crews adjusted to this slow cadence, performing tasks with deliberate attention, aware of both presence and absence in the surrounding waters. Even routine maintenance carried an unspoken weight, as men considered the impermanence that surrounded them. The smell of diesel and salt water grounded thought, while the hum of the vessel served as a constant companion. Conversations were sparse, quiet, and deliberate, shaped by the awareness that each action mattered in ways both immediate and unseen. Observation became both practical and contemplative, reading currents, distant echoes, and subtle shifts with care. And in these quiet motions, the lessons of the graveyard were internalized, a gentle awareness shaping skill, patience, and reflection. The Atlantic held all these layers together, immense and impartial, guiding understanding with soft persistence. In every depth the echoes of presence and absence intertwined, forming a silent archive of endurance. The history of loss beneath the waves shaped each decision aboard surviving vessels. Men reflected on those who had gone before, imagining their courage, choices, and quiet determination. Letters and mementos connected crews to the lives that had paused, grounding thought and emotion in memory. Even the hum of machinery and the vibration of hull reflected this duality, a bridge between action and remembrance. Routine patrols became exercises in observation and care, each maneuver influenced by knowledge of what could be lost. Communication and coordination with fellow crew members were tempered by reflection, awareness, and patience. The Atlantic, immense and indifferent, carried these lessons silently, shaping perception, rhythm, and action without judgment. And through this awareness, crews maintained calm, vigilance, and measured endurance. The ocean became both teacher and companion, imparting quiet insight into fragility and resilience. Presence even amid absence was honored beneath the waves. The sense of a graveyard was heightened by subtle cues and patterns across the Atlantic. Currents shifted gently around submerged hulls, echoing their presence through faint vibrations and pressure changes. Debris slowly drifting traced invisible paths through the water, hints of stories and movements long past. Crews interpreted these signals with care, connecting instinct with observation, skill with reflection. Even the smallest sounds, the hum of the engine's distant propeller echoes, reminded men of the ocean's memory and impartiality. Meals were quiet, sleep fragmented, yet these routines sustained both focus and resilience. Observation and reflection were intertwined, shaping decisions and actions across every patrol. And in this measured rhythm, the Atlantic revealed itself as patient, impartial, and profound, recording the convergence of life, skill, and absence. Each dive was both practical and contemplative, a negotiation between presence and the quiet memory of the graveyard. The sea held its archive with gentle insistence. The Atlantic's silence amplified its lessons, offering reflection alongside challenge. Crews moved carefully through narrow corridors, their movements deliberate and attentive. Maintenance, navigation, and observation were executed with subtle precision, guided by the awareness of absence as much as presence. Even small gestures, a glance, a shift of weight, a whispered note, carried significance in the quiet environment. The hum of machinery, the vibration of water, and the smell of diesel and salt water became markers of continuity and endurance. Reflection deepened as men considered the limits of skill, chance, and circumstance in the vast expanse surrounding them. Each patrol became a meditation, a slow, deliberate flow of thought, action, and memory. And through these rhythms, the Atlantic imparted both humility and understanding, shaping perception beneath the waves. The ocean preserved its stories quietly, vast, patient, and impartial. The mid-Atlantic graveyard became a silent companion to every moment beneath the surface. Even as new patrols ventured into the waters, the presence of the graveyard lingered. The lessons of loss, patience, and endurance were carried subtly, influencing observation, decision-making, and rhythm. Men moved with heightened awareness, balancing skill, anticipation, and reflection in each action. The ocean seemed to respond, currents and echoes interacting with the vessel in a continuous measured dialogue. Every surfacing and dive carried subtle tension, tempered by the knowledge of the vast history beneath. The hum of the vessel and vibration of steel, served as constant reminders of both presence and absence. Meals, conversation, and rest were quieter, slower, more deliberate, shaped by the rhythm of endurance and reflection. And in this environment, the Atlantic held its memory as gently as it held water, vast, patient, and impartial. The ocean's archive shaped every decision, every motion, every pause beneath the waves. Life continued, quietly and thoughtfully, within the embrace of the mid-Atlantic graveyard. By the end of this chapter, the Type VII's story had merged with the ocean's memory in profound ways. The Atlantic carried the echoes of patrols, victories, losses, and the quiet endurance of crews across every depth. Steel hulls rested among their counterparts, a testament to ambition, skill, and the impartiality of the sea. Men above and below reflected on these absences, internalizing lessons of patience, observation, and humility. Even routine operations became exercises in balance, skill, and awareness, shaped by memory as much as circumstance. The hum of machinery, smell of diesel, and rhythm of the boat served as companions to reflection and measured vigilance. And in the immense patient Atlantic, the convergence of presence, absence, and endurance became quietly tangible. The mid-Atlantic graveyard, vast, silent, and impartial, whispered its lessons across the waves. Patrols continued with care, contemplation, and quiet skill, and beneath it all, the ocean held its stories gently, vast, and unending. Even as the war stretched on, German engineers pursued visions of the next generation of submarines, striving to build vessels that could surpass the limitations of the Type VII. The Type IX, larger and capable of longer voyages, emerged as a response to these demands, promising new operational possibilities across distant seas. Yet the Type VII remained central, the workhorse of the Kriegsmarine, relied upon for both its familiarity and reliability. In shipyards, men and machines moved with quiet determination, shaping steel into hulls that carried hope, ambition, and the weight of necessity. Each innovation promised enhanced endurance, speed, or armament, yet these dreams encountered the constraints of production, material availability, and the pressure of time. Crews continued to train on the Type VII, learning its rhythms, limitations, and strengths as new designs gestated alongside it. Even as newer models appeared, the ocean itself continued to favor experience, skill, and careful observation over raw technological advantage. The Atlantic remained vast, indifferent, yet every vessel, old or new, moved within a subtle framework shaped by both opportunity and limitation. Men aboard adjusted to this duality, honoring the vessel they knew while imagining those yet to come. And in this balance, the story of innovation unfolded alongside endurance, quietly shaping the rhythm of the sea. The Type VII, compact and precise, had earned its reputation through adaptability and resilience. Its design, though aging, allowed for quick maneuvers, rapid dives, and an intimacy with the ocean that larger vessels could not match. Crews who knew its corridors and systems moved with near instinctive skill, a synergy of human and machine honed over countless hours beneath the waves. Yet the broader strategic reality pressed upon them. Technological innovation was advancing, and the older design faced new threats it had not been built to confront. Even as the Type IX promised range and payload, the industrial limitations meant that the fleet remained grounded in familiar steel. Men considered the duality of progress and pragmatism, balancing admiration for innovation with trust in proven reliability. The hum of machinery and the vibration of the hull became markers of continuity in an environment of constant evolution. Every dive and surfacing reflected the subtle negotiation between new possibilities and enduring capabilities. And through this quiet tension, the Atlantic absorbed both ambition and pragmatism in its patient expanse. The sea continued to shape the vessel and crew alike, impartial to progress and memory alike. Shipyards hummed with the rhythm of creation and repair, a quiet ballet of industrial effort. Steel plates were bent and joined, engines installed, and compartments tested for integrity and resilience. Engineers and workers moved with quiet determination, aware that every rivet, every seal contributed to life and endurance beneath the waves. Innovations were discussed and debated, adjustments made in careful increments as ambition met practical reality. The Type VII continued alongside these newer vessels, its familiar silhouette a steadying presence amid change. Crews trained in its narrow halls, maintaining expertise in a vessel that remained both trusted and increasingly challenged. Each patrol reflected a combination of confidence in experience and awareness of evolving threats. And while the promise of new designs lingered, the sea continued to remind men of the limitations of time, circumstance, and industrial reality. The Atlantic, vast and impartial, became a quiet arbiter of both innovation and endurance. Steel, water, and skill intertwined beneath the waves, shaping human endeavor in subtle rhythms. Innovation brought hope, yet each advancement also highlighted the enduring value of the Type VII. Designers imagined engines capable of greater speed, hulls stronger and quieter, and torpedo systems more efficient and flexible. Yet production could not keep pace with aspiration, and familiar vessels remained central to every patrol. Crews relied on muscle memory, instinct, and the intimacy of long practice, trusting knowledge of the Type VII in ways they could not yet extend to new models. Even small adjustments, trim changes, ballast adjustments, periscope routines, carried weight, balancing skill with technology in the quiet calculus of survival. The ocean did not reward novelty alone. Experience and patience remained essential. Subtle vibrations, changes in current, and distant echoes became data that could not be replicated by design alone. And in this interplay of new and old, the Type VII continued to traverse the Atlantic with quiet reliability. Its presence became a bridge between ambition and reality, past innovation and future hope. The sea absorbed these movements with calm impartiality, holding both vessel and human in patient rhythm. The contrast between newer designs and the Type VII emphasized the limits of both ambition and circumstance. While engineers imagined distant seas, longer patrols, and expanded capabilities, men continued to navigate familiar waters with precision and care. The vessel's compact nature, its steel hull, and the rhythm of its systems were known intimately, offering advantages that new models could not yet replicate. Training incorporated both practical skill and reflection, as crews balanced the lessons of experience with the demands of emerging technology. Each patrol became a meditation on endurance, adaptation, and the quiet negotiation between possibility and constraint. The Atlantic carried this duality gently, vast, impartial, and patient, shaping outcomes without visible intervention. Even minor adjustments to course or depth reflected both calculation and awareness of the environment's subtle influences. And as new models slowly entered service, the Type VII remained central, a reminder that innovation and endurance coexist in quiet, persistent rhythm. Steel, water, and human skill intertwined, carrying both memory and aspiration beneath the waves. The vessel's reliability became both anchor and guide for those navigating evolving seas. Every innovation highlighted the enduring human element of submarine warfare. Crews adapted to incremental changes, learning to blend instinct, training, and emerging techniques in the narrow confines of their vessel. The hum of engines, the vibration of the hull, and the subtle movement of water became a continuous dialogue between machine and human. Even as newer designs promised greater range or stealth, the Type VII's compact systems allowed subtle responsiveness that crews could master with patience. Observation, calculation, and quiet reflection continued to guide each decision beneath the waves. Letters from home, the smell of salt and diesel, and the soft rhythm of machinery offered continuity amid technological transition. The Atlantic remained impartial, vast and patient, shaping both vessel and crew in equal measure. And in this interplay of steel, skill, and environment, the balance between innovation and familiarity became quietly tangible. Every dive, every surfacing, and every maneuver carried lessons of endurance alongside dreams of improvement. The Type VII persisted, a vessel of both memory and evolving ambition. The push for modernization underscored the tension between industrial possibility and oceanic reality. While ambitious designs promised extended range, new armaments and stealth enhancements, production, resources, and training often lagged behind concept. The Type VII remained indispensable, relied upon for its known strengths, efficiency, and predictability. Crews continued to practice routines honed over years, learning the vessel's subtle responses to currents, ballast, and pressure. Even small adjustments, steering, periscope observation, or engine modulation, reflected intimate knowledge of both machine and environment. The ocean carried this duality in silence, vast, impartial, and unwavering, shaping endurance and movement with quiet authority. Each patrol became an exercise in adaptation, balancing experience, skill, and awareness of evolving circumstances. And through this rhythm, men and vessel alike navigated both challenge and continuity beneath the waves. The Atlantic, patient and vast, absorbed every motion and calculation with gentle insistence. Innovation advanced slowly, tethered by reality, yet the Type VII endured. By the end of this chapter, the story of the Type VII was one of resilience amidst evolution. New designs promised possibilities, yet the familiar steel hull, compact dimensions, and practiced crews continued to dominate practical reality. The Atlantic remained vast, impartial, and patient, shaping outcomes with a quiet, persistent rhythm. Crews moved with confidence and reflection, balancing the lessons of experience with awareness of the broader technological landscape. Even as innovation advanced slowly, endurance, observation, and skill remained essential companions beneath the waves. Every dive and surfacing carried a meditation on the relationship between old and new, ambition and pragmatism. The hum of machinery, smell of diesel, and vibration of the hull reinforced continuity in a changing world. And in the ocean's vast, quiet expanse, the Type VII continued to navigate both water and circumstance, resilient, enduring, and quietly essential. The balance of innovation and reality shaped every movement beneath the waves. Human skill and experience remained the core of survival amidst change. Departing from port had once been routine, measured, and filled with purpose. But by the height of the war, the Bay of Biscay had become a gauntlet, a narrow stretch of water watched from above by aircraft and vigilance alike. The sea itself remained indifferent, vast and patient, yet every patrol began with a tension that could not be ignored. Type VII crews moved with quiet awareness, noting each shadow on the water, each distant echo of engines as they prepared to traverse the open bay. Even familiar routes carried uncertainty, and experience offered only partial comfort against the unseen dangers in the air. Men checked engines, ballast and periscopes with careful repetition, the rhythm of preparation both calming and deliberate. The smell of diesel mixed with salt water, grounding thought and focus in the present, while the vibration of the vessel became a quiet companion. Every departure was a negotiation between ambition and patience, confidence and caution, as the Atlantic held its watch over them. The horizon stretched in every direction, vast, indifferent, and waiting, shaping action through presence alone. And in this measured tension, the Bay of Biscay became more than water. It was a proving ground of endurance and attention. As Type VII boats slid quietly from port, the shadow of the air grew ever more present. Allied reconnaissance, increasingly precise and persistent, transformed the expanse above into a subtle, constant reminder of vulnerability. Crews moved with deliberate calm, eyes and ears attuned to the hum of engines, the soft pulse of propellers, and the distant whisper of waves. Even the routine of departure became a choreography of care, where every rotation of machinery and every adjustment of ballast carried weight. Men trusted one another in ways that went beyond words, each movement a silent communication of skill, patience, and understanding. The bay demanded attention to rhythm, sound, and observation, testing both human and machine in quiet ways. Even minor shifts in current, light, or horizon could hint at the presence of observation above. Crews adapted instinctively, drawing on training, experience, and the quiet awareness of risk. And in this still, tense rhythm, the Atlantic and sky became partners in shaping the outcome of each departure. Movement through the bay was deliberate, measured, and guided by subtle insight. The silence beneath the waves carried its own weight, a calm that contrasted with the tension above. Men listened intently to the vibration of the hull, the subtle hum of machinery, and the distant motion of water around them. Even the smallest details, the angle of a periscope, the timing of engine adjustments, the shift of ballast, became markers of presence and caution. Observation became both skill and meditation, blending perception with reflection in measured patterns. The Bay of Biscay imposed a quiet structure, demanding patience, focus, and endurance. Crews internalized this rhythm, their movements precise, deliberate, and synchronized with the vessel's responses. Letters, memories, and whispered conversation grounded thought, offering continuity in the face of pervasive uncertainty. And through this interplay of human skill, machine, and environment, men learned to navigate both the physical and psychological expanse of the gauntlet. The Atlantic held them, indifferent and patient, while above, shadows of vigilance shaped every motion. Presence and endurance intertwined beneath waves and sky alike, creating a rhythm both tense and contemplative. The journey across the bay became a test of quiet perseverance. Each patrol, each departure, carried the weight of experience, reflection, and anticipation. Even familiar coordinates demanded renewed attention, as the Atlantic and air above conspired in subtle, unpredictable ways. Crew members checked and rechecked instruments, engines, and observation tools with deliberate calm, grounding themselves in both routine and awareness. The smell of salt, diesel, and metal reinforced presence in the moment, while vibration and hum marked continuity and readiness. Subtle signs, a ripple in the water, a shadow in the distance, a faint echo of distant engines, were interpreted with quiet care. Every dive, ascent, and turn reflected both skill and patience, a negotiation between knowledge and uncertainty. And in this space, the Bay of Biscay became both obstacle and teacher. shaping rhythm, attention, and endurance in the hands of those who navigated it. The Atlantic's vastness framed every movement, holding history, memory, and consequence silently beneath the waves. The gauntlet demanded respect, focus, and quiet determination, and the crew responded in measured rhythm. Even the anticipation of danger became part of the vessel's internal cadence. Heartbeats and breath synchronized with engines, propellers, and currents, forming a shared rhythm of focus and preparation. Men reflected quietly on the history of the bay, of boats lost and lessons learned, grounding present vigilance in memory. Each departure was layered with both skill and awareness, experience and intuition shaping every maneuver. Observation became meditation, training merged with instinct, and subtle cues guided action with gentle insistence. Even routine operations, checking instruments, adjusting ballast, or scanning the horizon, became markers of endurance and presence. The Atlantic and sky interacted silently with these movements, impartial yet influential, vast yet detailed in their guidance. And as the vessel moved steadily through the bay, the crew's awareness and skill shaped a quiet rhythm, both cautious and deliberate. The sea and air held them in attentive balance, vast, patient, and precise. Each patrol reinforced the convergence of vigilance, endurance, and calm, a subtle triumph in itself. The perils of the Bay of Biscay weighed on thought, reflection, and motion. Crews understood that even small errors could be magnified across the expanse, and attention to rhythm, detail, and timing became essential. Engines hummed, ballast shifted, and the hull responded as a silent companion, integrating human skill and steel. Subtle shifts in waves or shadow could signal distant presence, prompting measured adjustments and quiet reflection. Every rotation of machinery, every breath, and every glance out the narrow viewports became a quiet dialogue with the ocean and sky. Men maintained patience, observation, and endurance, drawing on training and the accumulated lessons of previous patrols. Even the familiarity of routine carried weight, tempered by vigilance and contemplation. And in this delicate interplay, each patrol through the bay became both test and meditation, shaping presence, skill, and calm. The Atlantic held all movement in patient embrace, vast, impartial, and enduring. Each patrol became a quiet exercise in measured courage and attentiveness. Departure and return mirrored each other, a rhythm of tension and relief. Men reflected quietly on the narrow corridor of water, the presence of air above, and the immense depth below. Engines and ballast responded to subtle changes, and every adjustment carried significance. Observation and instinct blended, creating a quiet, continuous flow of awareness. The bay demanded patience, calm, and skill, challenging both vessel and crew with subtle insistence. Even familiar turns or maneuvers required deliberate attention, reinforcing endurance and reflection. The Atlantic's vast expanse contrasted with the concentrated focus needed, shaping thought and action simultaneously. And as patrols continued, the rhythm of departure, transit, and return became a meditation, embedding both awareness and calm into every motion. The crew moved as one with vessel, water, and environment, synchronized in skill and presence. The Bay of Biscay remained a gauntlet, demanding respect, patience, and quiet resilience at every mile. By the close of this chapter, the Type VII had learned the rhythm of the gauntlet. Departure, transit, and return became exercises in patience, skill, and quiet endurance, shaped by both the Atlantic and vigilance from above. Every maneuver, observation, and adjustment carried weight, informed by memory, reflection, and attentive skill. Even the vast, indifferent sea seemed to guide action subtly, holding each vessel within its patient rhythm. Men moved deliberately, grounding thought in routine, presence, and awareness, navigating both water and air with care. The smell of salt, diesel, and steel marked continuity, while the hum and vibration of the hull reinforced presence. Each patrol through the bay became a meditation on skill, endurance, and observation, a quiet triumph amid pervasive peril. And beneath it all the Atlantic held history, memory, and consequence silently, vast, impartial, and eternal. Every motion, breath, and thought became part of the rhythm of the bay, a gentle assertion of human skill within the ocean's enduring expanse. By 1943, the rhythm of the Atlantic had shifted, and the wolf packs that once moved with quiet confidence now faltered under unseen pressure. Type VII submarines, built for stealth and precision, found themselves facing an ocean that had grown ever more watchful. Radar pulses, aircraft overhead, and escort screens stretched across convoys, narrowing the space where hunters could operate undisturbed. Crews sensed this change as a subtle, persistent tension, a quiet dread that contrasted with the controlled confidence of earlier patrols. Even experienced captains, accustomed to the vessel's rhythm and response, had to negotiate new realities with every dive and maneuver. Letters from home, the smell of diesel, and the hum of engines offered small anchors to normality. Yet the awareness of danger pervaded every movement. Patrols once planned with optimism now required patience, caution, and constant adjustment. The Atlantic remained vast, indifferent, yet its currents and depths carried a new, almost imperceptible sense of vigilance. Men reflected quietly on the changing tides of fortune, the subtle erosion of the advantage they had once held. And in this space between expectation and reality, the wolf pack's dominance began to dissolve. The collapse of coordinated attacks unfolded slowly, measured in hours, days, and the quiet tally of lost contact. Allied forces employed radar and sonar with increasing skill, constraining the freedom that Type VII boats had once enjoyed. Aircraft patrolled expanses that had previously seemed open, their presence a constant reminder of vulnerability. Crews adjusted with careful deliberation, balancing experience, observation, and patience in every maneuver. Even the simplest movements, ballast adjustments, engine modulation, or periscope rotations, required heightened attention. The Atlantic, vast and patient, absorbed these changes, indifferent to the consequences, yet shaping every outcome through subtle resistance. Captains reflected on the interplay between skill, chance, and evolving technology, sensing the limits of even the most disciplined crews. Communication became both essential and cautious, as missteps could no longer be absorbed by the vessel or the environment. The wolf pack, once a symbol of synchronized power, moved now with hesitation and restraint. And in this quiet decline, endurance and observation became as important as ambition and aggression. Dönitz, architect of the wolf packs, faced the slow erosion of his vision with measured despair. Strategies that had relied on coordination, stealth, and surprise met with relentless detection and interception. Reports from patrols carried both achievement and caution, as each encounter with Allied forces demonstrated new vulnerabilities. The Type VII, reliable in design and familiar in operation, could no longer guarantee safety or success against technological and numerical advantage. Crews moved with careful deliberation, drawing on training, memory, and subtle intuition to navigate increasingly dangerous waters. Letters, the smell of salt and diesel, and the hum of engines continued to ground reflection amid uncertainty. Even small errors, once inconsequential, now carried amplified risk, reinforcing the quiet tension aboard each boat. The Atlantic held all motion with patient authority, indifferent to rank, experience, or ambition. Decisions were measured, deliberate, and attentive, reflecting the convergence of skill and circumstance. And in this gradual dissolution, the wolf pack's legend met the calm inevitability of reality. The rhythm of patrols changed. Marked by cautious dives and extended observation, crews learned to move more slowly, to anticipate detection, and to conserve energy for moments of critical action. Even routine procedures, engine checks, ballast adjustments, or periscope scans, took on new significance, each linked subtly to survival and outcome. The Atlantic, vast and patient, shaped these movements without comment, holding history and consequence alike beneath its surface. Men spoke in hushed tones, sharing reflection, memory, and quiet calculation as they negotiated the narrow margins of space and time. Letters from home, the vibration of the hull, and the smell of diesel reinforced presence in the moment, grounding both skill and awareness. Every patrol became a study in patience, observation, and endurance, measured in subtle shifts of water, sound, and response. The wolf packs, once symbols of aggression and coordination, now moved with reflection, each action deliberate and tempered by circumstance. And in this calm, measured rhythm, the Atlantic whispered lessons of impermanence, patience, and endurance. The decline unfolded with quiet insistence beneath the waves. Losses became both inevitable and pervasive, shaping thought, reflection, and movement. Even experienced crews felt the subtle pressure of attrition, the quiet toll of patrols that ended without contact or with unexpected outcomes. Each vessel, familiar in its dimensions and responses, became both a refuge and a fragile boundary between life and absence. Observation, patience, and skill guided every decision as crews measured depth, current, and horizon in subtle calculations. The Atlantic, vast and indifferent, held these tensions silently, shaping survival through persistent resistance rather than aggression. Letters and whispered conversation became companions to vigilance, anchoring thought in continuity and reflection. Even minor adjustments, engine modulation, ballast shifts, or course changes, carried amplified consequence in these constrained circumstances. And through this careful negotiation of skill, environment, and awareness, men navigated both physical and psychological space. Presence and endurance intertwined beneath the waves, a quiet testament to perseverance. The wolf pack's once unstoppable rhythm gave way to measured, reflective motion. The sea became both teacher and mirror, revealing the limits of coordination and control. Crews noted subtle signs of detection, interpreting currents, echoes, and distant vibrations with careful attention. Every dive and ascent became a meditation on patience, skill, and reflection, a rhythm born of necessity. Even routine maneuvers took on deliberate weight, grounded in awareness of shifting technology and relentless observation above. The Atlantic absorbed these movements, vast, impartial, and patient, shaping outcome through quiet resistance rather than visible force. Letters from home and the hum of machinery grounded thought, memory, and endurance in the present. Crews adapted with subtle skill, learning to reconcile ambition with the reality of constrained freedom. The wolf packs, once bold and synchronized, moved now with restraint, reflection, and careful negotiation. And in this shift, the Atlantic whispered lessons of humility, patience, and impermanence. Each patrol carried the quiet echo of both achievement and limitation beneath the waves. Even Donitz, from command, felt the imperceptible erosion of advantage. Strategies that had relied on surprise, coordination, and stealth now collided with an ocean monitored from air and sea alike. Reports from patrols carried subtle warnings, small details of risk and loss that accumulated over time. The Type VII, once trusted as a reliable workhorse, was now challenged by its own limitations and the advancing technology of the adversary. Crews moved with deliberate calm, observation, and reflection, attuned to both machine and environment. Every action, every adjustment carried weight and consequence, subtle yet pervasive in the rhythm of patrols. The Atlantic remained vast and indifferent, patient yet insistent in shaping outcome. And through this measured decline, the wolf pack's myth persisted quietly, layered now with endurance, reflection, and subdued caution. Presence, skill, and awareness became the new markers of success beneath the waves. The narrative of dominance had shifted to one of resilience and careful observation. By the close of this chapter, the wolf packs had entered a new phase of their story. Coordinated dominance had yielded to measured survival, as technology, strategy, and circumstance constrained movement and ambition. Crews continued to patrol with skill, observation, and patience, navigating an Atlantic that remained vast, indifferent, and patient. The Type VII endured as both companion and framework for human skill, a vessel defined by reliability, adaptability, and the quiet rhythm of experience. Letters, memories, and the hum of machinery reinforced presence and grounding amid pervasive uncertainty. Every dive, surfacing, and maneuver reflected the convergence of reflection, endurance, and careful observation. The ocean absorbed these movements silently, vast and impartial, shaping outcome through subtle insistence rather than overt force. And in this quiet evolution, the Wolfpack's story became one of measured endurance, humility, and reflection, tempered by the patient expanse of the Atlantic. Life beneath the waves continued, delicate, deliberate, and resilient, carrying both memory and skill forward. The end of dominance had become the beginning of endurance, a silent, reflective rhythm beneath the sea. Long after the wolf packs had faded from the Atlantic, the waters carried a stillness that seemed almost unnatural. Survivors recalled the quiet of the deep, the subtle hum of engines, and the gentle vibration of steel through water, sensations that lingered long after patrols ended. Even in port, memory carried the rhythm of the ocean, a pulse measured by experience and reflection. The vastness of the North Atlantic seemed both protective and isolating, holding stories in its indifferent expanse. Crews remembered the silence between contacts, the moments when the only movement was the subtle sway of the vessel beneath the waves. Letters from home, the smell of diesel and salt, and the hum of machinery became markers of continuity amid reflection. Even victory felt hollow, tempered by the knowledge of absence and the quiet weight of endurance. Observation, patience, and skill remained etched into memory, guiding thought as much as action. And in this space of reflection, the Atlantic held both memory and presence with patient impartiality, vast and enduring. The ghosts of the wolf packs lingered quietly beneath the waves, shaping remembrance without demand. Patrols that once carried urgency now existed in memory as a series of measured rhythms. Men recalled the gentle tilt of the boat, the subtle pressure of water against the hull, and the whisper of currents around the steel shell. The vastness of the ocean emphasized both insignificance and resilience, a paradox that shaped thought and reflection alike. Even routine tasks, checking instruments, adjusting ballast, or scanning the horizon, resonated with a sense of quiet purpose and endurance. Memories intertwined with sensation, the smell of salt and diesel, recalling countless hours beneath the waves. Every sound, vibration, and shift of light became a reminder of skill, awareness, and the patience required to navigate such an environment. And in the recollection of these moments, the solitude of patrols became a form of meditation, a gentle rhythm that persisted beyond duty. The Atlantic, patient and impartial, held these memories as it had held the vessels themselves, vast and unchanging. Reflection became a companion to endurance, subtle and persistent. And in the quiet of remembrance, the sea whispered both absence and continuity, holding history gently in its depths. Even the victories of the past carried a soft, reflective weight. Crews remembered the success of coordinated attacks, the precision of maneuvers, and the disciplined rhythm of patrols. Yet these moments were tinged with the awareness of impermanence, the knowledge that every encounter beneath the waves was part of a larger, indifferent tide. The North Atlantic, vast and patient, absorbed every achievement with gentle impartiality, holding it alongside memory, loss, and endurance. Men reflected quietly on the spaces between success and consequence, the silence that followed action, and the rhythms of both anticipation and resolution. Letters and whispered conversation became anchors to presence, grounding thought in reflection and observation. Even the vibration of the hull and hum of engines, once markers of activity, became companions in contemplation. Every patrol, dive, and surfacing had left its imprint on memory, shaping perception, long after the mission ended. And in this subtle awareness, the Atlantic became a mirror of both endurance and reflection, vast, patient, and quietly guiding thought. The ghosts of the wolf packs lingered, persistent yet gentle beneath the surface. Time itself seemed to slow within memory, stretching moments into long reflective arcs. Crews recalled long hours spent in silence, the soft movement of water around the hull, and the delicate hum of machinery beneath their feet. Observation became meditation, each glance and adjustment layered with both skill and presence. Even absence had weight, measured in memory and subtle recollection of motion, sound, and pressure. The Atlantic carried this stillness, vast and impartial, shaping reflection as it had movement. Men spoke quietly of endurance, patience, and the quiet rhythms that had carried them through days and nights beneath the waves. Letters, smells, and subtle tactile sensations grounded memory in the present, weaving reflection and presence together. And through this gentle contemplation, the ghosts of past patrols became a quiet companion, a rhythm both soft and persistent. Each remembered dive and maneuver lingered like a note in a slow, unfolding melody. The sea remained patient, vast, and timeless, holding both memory and presence beneath its surface. The loneliness of patrols became a central memory, shaping both thought and perception. Even in the company of others, silence dominated beneath the waves, broken only by the subtle hum of machinery and water against steel. Men recalled the intimacy of the vessel, the way every shift of weight or adjustment of ballast carried meaning. Letters and distant communication offered fleeting connection, yet the ocean's vastness imposed a patient, indifferent boundary. Every patrol seemed to stretch endlessly, the rhythm of engines and currents marking both time and endurance. Crews reflected on the contrast between motion and stillness, observation and contemplation, action and pause. And in these moments, the solitude of the North Atlantic became a teacher, offering perspective on presence, awareness, and patience. The gentle sway of water, the soft vibration of the hull, and the smell of salt and diesel reinforced grounding and continuity. Reflection became a companion, subtle yet persistent, guiding thought through both memory and quiet observation. The ghosts of the wolf packs lingered as a rhythm of endurance, echoing softly through time and memory. Memory carried the texture of the sea, subtle and sensory, shaped by hours of patient observation. The Atlantic remained vast, indifferent, and patient, its presence shaping thought and perception as much as movement once had. Crews recalled the gentle tilt of the vessel, the hum of engines, and the whisper of water along steel walls. Letters from home, the smell of diesel, and the quiet presence of colleagues grounded awareness, creating a rhythm of reflection that persisted beyond patrols. Even the victories and losses of the past seemed softened, measured by endurance, skill, and quiet observation. The ocean held both presence and memory, vast and impartial, offering continuity without demand. Men reflected on absence, solitude, and the gentle rhythm of life beneath the waves, letting time stretch slowly in contemplation. Every remembered dive and maneuver carried weight, subtly shaping understanding and reflection. And in this calm, measured awareness, the Atlantic became a companion, patient, vast, and quietly enduring. The ghosts of the North Atlantic whispered softly, carrying both memory and presence in their wake. Even silence held meaning, a companion that shaped thought and endurance beneath the waves. Crews remembered the moments when all movement seemed suspended, the hum of machinery and vibration of the hull marking a quiet rhythm. Observation became meditation, each glance, shift, and adjustment layered with reflection and experience. The vast Atlantic absorbed these moments, indifferent yet persistent, shaping awareness with patient authority. Letters and memories anchored thought, while the subtle sensory environment, salt, diesel, water, steel, reinforced continuity. Every patrol became a measure of patience and endurance, extending into long arcs of reflection beyond the immediate task. And in this quiet, suspended space, the ghosts of the wolf packs lingered, echoing in memory without urgency or demand. Presence, skill, and observation remained intertwined, a gentle rhythm that persisted beneath waves and through memory alike. The North Atlantic held history, reflection, and endurance in equal measure. And in its patient vastness, the quiet rhythm of the past continued to whisper softly to those who remembered. By the close of this chapter, the Atlantic carried a still, reflective weight, vast and patient. The wolf packs were gone, yet their presence remained in memory, sensation, and quiet observation. Crews moved through recollection as they had once moved beneath the waves, with skill, patience, and awareness. The hum of machinery, the vibration of steel, the smell of salt and diesel, and the gentle sway of water became companions in meditation. Every patrol, dive, and surfacing lingered in memory, a rhythm both soft and persistent. Letters, whispers, and reflections grounded thought and presence, weaving a gentle pattern of continuity. Even absence carried meaning, measured in endurance, observation, and quiet reflection. And in this vast, patient expanse, the ghosts of the North Atlantic remained, persistent, gentle, and enduring, carrying both memory and presence beneath the surface. Time, motion, and stillness intertwined, creating a calm rhythm that persisted long after the wolf packs had vanished. The ocean whispered softly, vast, indifferent, and eternal, a quiet companion for those who remembered. By 1944, the Type VII submarines had become echoes of their former dominance, relics moving steadily through a sea that had grown vigilant and relentless. Each patrol carried a quiet weight, the knowledge that survival was uncertain and that the ocean had grown ever more attentive. Crews checked instruments and machinery with deliberate calm, each adjustment measured, each observation deliberate, Letters from home lingered in thought, grounding presence amid the tension of anticipation and reflection. Even the hum of engines and vibration of steel offered comfort, a subtle reminder of continuity amid uncertainty. The Atlantic, vast and patient, absorbed both presence and memory, indifferent to human concern, yet shaping outcome through its constancy. Men moved with careful attention, skill and experience, guiding every maneuver, while awareness of risk tempered ambition. Every departure carried the echo of both history and impermanence, shaping a quiet rhythm of reflection. And in this measured space, the final patrols became exercises in patience, endurance, and subtle vigilance. The wolf packs of the past were gone, yet their quiet legacy persisted beneath the waves. The missions themselves had become fraught with quiet inevitability. Allied air and sea patrols stretched across previously open spaces, narrowing the room where Type VII boats could maneuver undetected. Crews adapted, drawing on skill, observation, and calm reflection, aware that even small errors could carry amplified consequence. Letters, memories, and the subtle sensory rhythm of diesel, salt, and steel reinforced presence, providing grounding amid tension. Observation became both skill and meditation, every movement deliberate, every adjustment measured against the shifting tide of circumstance. Even familiar routines, checking ballast, adjusting depth, or scanning the horizon, carried new weight, reshaped by relentless pressure above. The Atlantic remained vast, indifferent, and patient, offering no guidance, only constancy. Men moved with a quiet rhythm, endurance interwoven with anticipation, reflection, and skill. And in this persistent, measured motion, the final patrols became both a testament and meditation, an echo of perseverance beneath the waves. The sea held their legacy, vast and eternal, shaping thought and movement alike. Losses had grown stark, a quiet shadow over every departure. Crews counted familiar faces less frequently, the empty bunks and quiet absence marking reflection and memory. Even the hum of engines seemed subdued, a reminder of fragility and the delicacy of balance beneath the waves. Letters, whispers, and shared memories became anchors, guiding thought and presence in the face of pervasive uncertainty. The Atlantic, vast and patient, absorbed history silently, vast yet impartial, holding absence alongside memory. Every patrol carried the tension of awareness, skill, and quiet vigilance, with each dive and ascent a negotiation between past experience and current peril. The Type VII, faithful in design and response, continued to serve as companion and framework for endurance. Even amid increasing loss, crews moved with deliberate calm, observation, and reflection, sustaining rhythm and awareness. And through this gentle endurance, the final patrols became both reflection and presence, quiet tests of skill beneath the indifferent ocean. The Atlantic held both story and silence, vast, eternal, and patient in its embrace. Even the act of departing port carried a quiet solemnity. Men moved through preparation with measured attention, aware of the narrowing corridors of safety and the weight of history in every mile of water. Engines hummed with familiar rhythm, ballast shifted with deliberate care, and the subtle vibration of steel against water marked continuity. Observation guided motion, each glance and adjustment carrying both experience and anticipation. The Atlantic remained vast and indifferent, shaping outcome silently, yet persistent in influence. Letters, smells, and memory anchored thought in reflection, providing a gentle rhythm against the underlying tension. Each patrol became a negotiation of skill, endurance, and presence, measured against an ocean that offered neither leniency nor concern. And in this subtle interplay, departure itself became a meditation, quiet, deliberate, and full of reflection. Men moved as one with vessel, water, and environment, synchronized in subtle skill and careful awareness. The Atlantic received them with patient impartiality, vast, enduring, and unchanging. The sense of mission carried both honor and quiet inevitability. Crews were aware that the Type VII's heyday had passed, yet discipline, experience, and skill persisted in every action. Letters from home and whispered conversations anchored thought, offering continuity amid reflection and anticipation. The Atlantic, immense and patient, shaped perception and movement, impartial to human intent, vast in both space and consequence. Observation became meditation, each adjustment check, and maneuver layered with awareness and memory. Even routine operations took on amplified weight, reflecting the constraints imposed by technology, vigilance, and history. Men moved deliberately, balancing skill with caution, presence with anticipation, and endurance with subtle reflection. And in this quiet rhythm, the final patrols became exercises in resilience, persistence, and reflection, each movement measured against the ocean's patient expanse. The Type VII endured as companion, framework, and vessel of memory, and through it all, the Atlantic remained patient, vast, and eternal, holding both story and silence. Even as losses mounted, the human spirit persisted, quietly present in every patrol. Crews drew on memory, skill, and subtle intuition, sustaining attention and endurance despite the knowledge of peril. Letters, the smell of salt and diesel, and the vibration of the hull reinforced grounding and continuity in thought and presence. The Atlantic remained vast and impartial, shaping reflection as it had movement, holding both absence and skill beneath its surface. Each patrol became a meditation on patience, endurance, and subtle awareness, a rhythm of presence that extended beyond immediate action. Observation, reflection, and calm guided motion, anchoring thought in continuity and memory. Even minor adjustments carried meaning, marking both survival and skill within the persistent expanse of the ocean. And in this quiet endurance, the final patrols moved with deliberate calm, measured attention, and reflective presence beneath the waves. The Atlantic held all of it, patient and eternal, vast and impartial, shaping thought, memory, and movement alike. By the close of the final patrols, the Atlantic had claimed its quiet rhythm of endurance. The Type VII, once predator, now lingered as companion, framework, and measure of human skill. Crews moved with deliberate attention, reflection, and calm, navigating an ocean that had grown watchful, vast, and indifferent. Letters, the hum of machinery, the smell of diesel and salt, and subtle vibrations grounded presence in reflection and awareness. Every dive, ascent, and maneuver carried meaning, shaped by history, experience, and attentive skill. The Atlantic received each vessel in patient impartiality, absorbing both story and memory without comment. Observation and reflection intertwined, a rhythm that persisted beyond the immediate task, shaping thought, awareness, and endurance. And in this quiet meditation beneath the waves, the final patrols carried both the persistence of skill and the gentle acknowledgement of impermanence. The ocean remained vast, patient, and eternal, holding memory, presence, and legacy within its depths. And as the Type VII moved through its last missions, it left behind a rhythm of quiet endurance, reflection, and subtle persistence. The legacy of these final patrols endured in memory, sensation, and reflection. Men recalled the vastness of the Atlantic, the subtle hum of engines, and the gentle vibration of steel beneath waves. Letters whispered conversation, and tactile experience anchored presence in both thought and reflection. Even absence carried meaning, measured in endurance, observation, and quiet awareness. The Atlantic held all of it: history, memory, presence, and skill, in patient vastness, indifferent yet persistent. Each patrol, maneuver, and adjustment became a meditation on skill, endurance, and subtle reflection, a rhythm both delicate and persistent. Crews moved deliberately, observation and reflection, guiding action in measured rhythm. And in this gentle cadence, the final Type VII patrols became a quiet testimony, a measured acknowledgement of both human skill and the patient, eternal presence of the Atlantic. The ocean whispered softly, vast, indifferent, and enduring, carrying both memory and presence beneath its surface. And in that quiet vastness, the final patrols passed into history, leaving behind a rhythm that persisted in reflection and memory. By 1945, the Atlantic had grown quiet in a way it had not known before. The wolf packs, once prowling endlessly beneath the waves, had vanished, leaving only memory and reflection. Some Type VII boats were scuttled by their crews, deliberate acts of closure, steel sinking slowly into patient water. Others surrendered, surfaces breaking through waves, to mark the quiet transition from hunter to held. Many simply vanished, swallowed by the vastness of the ocean, leaving only absence and enduring silence. Crews who survived carried the hum of engines, the vibration of steel, and the scent of salt and diesel in memory. Subtle reminders of time spent beneath the surface. Letters and whispered recollections held them together, offering small comfort amid reflection and quiet presence. Even absence became tangible, a companion in contemplation, measured in patience and enduring awareness. And in this fading, the Type VII moved from active presence into history, leaving the ocean as witness to quiet endings. The Atlantic received all with patient impartiality, vast and enduring, holding memory, absence, and silence alike. The surrender of remaining vessels was understated, a quiet acceptance rather than spectacle. Men moved with deliberate calm, each step measured, aware of the ocean's impartial vastness. Engines hummed softly as vessels surfaced, water flowing along steel sides with gentle persistence. Crews reflected on missions, patrols, and moments of endurance, each memory carrying the weight of experience and subtle reflection. Letters from home and distant whispers anchored thought, offering continuity in the face of abrupt transition. Even the final commands became a rhythm of calm awareness, each adjustment deliberate, each movement intentional. The Atlantic, vast and patient, held these endings in silent watchfulness, impartial yet shaping the narrative through presence. Observation and reflection guided each motion, awareness tempered by the rhythm of the ocean itself. And in this deliberate surrender, the last Type VI is passed from active pursuit to quiet history, their presence echoing beneath the waves. The sea absorbed them, vast and unchanging, carrying memory and absence in equal measure. Some crews chose scuttling, letting vessels sink slowly into patient water. The act was quiet, deliberate, and respectful, steel slipping into darkness beneath the waves. Men observed with calm attention, noting the gentle resistance of water, the soft vibrations of hulls, and the subtle hiss of release. Even in closure, memory and reflection persisted, grounded by sensory experience, the smell of salt and diesel, the hum of machinery, and the gentle sway of the ocean. Letters whispered conversation, and tactile awareness anchored thought, carrying reflection and presence into the enduring silence. The Atlantic received each sinking with impartiality, vast and unchanging, absorbing both action and absence. Crews moved with deliberate patience, observation and reflection, guiding motion in measured rhythm. And in this quiet culmination, the wolf of the Atlantic dissolved into the deep, leaving stillness and contemplation in its wake. Time and water carried both story and silence, patient and eternal. The Atlantic remained vast, indifferent, yet deeply aware of what had passed beneath its surface. Many boats simply vanished, lost to the vastness without announcement or witness. The ocean swallowed them gently, the silence as complete as it was inevitable. Crews who survived spoke softly of absent comrades, the hum of machinery and steel lingering in memory. Letters from home, reflections on patrols, and subtle sensory awareness carried the presence of experience into quiet contemplation. Even absence had texture, measured in vibration, smell, and the rhythm of memory and observation. The Atlantic remained vast, patient, and impartial, indifferent to human endings, yet holding them in persistent memory. Observation and reflection intertwined, marking skill, endurance, and subtle presence long after missions had ceased. Each vanished vessel became part of the enduring rhythm of the sea. Memory entwined with stillness, reflection with the unchanging tide. The wolf of the Atlantic, once present and predatory, existed now as echo, subtle and enduring. And in this quiet echo, the Atlantic held both absence and presence, patient, eternal, and unchanging. Even as the final missions ended, the human spirit endured quietly beneath reflection. Men remembered patrols, the sway of vessels, and the hum of engines, each sensation a companion in meditation. Letters, whispers, and memory reinforced continuity and presence, grounding awareness amid absence. The Atlantic, vast and impartial, shaped reflection as it had shaped motion, carrying both history and enduring memory. Observation and quiet awareness guided each step, each adjustment, each pause, blending skill and reflection into gentle rhythm. Even endings held weight, measured in patience, experience, and subtle presence beneath the waves. Crews carried absence as companion, memory as rhythm, and reflection as guide, moving deliberately through the quiet of transition. And in this final meditation, the last Type VI, these became part of the enduring presence of the ocean. History and memory interwoven with patient vastness. Time, motion, and silence intertwined in reflection beneath unchanging water. The Atlantic, patient and eternal, held all within its depths. The wolf of the Atlantic had completed its course, passing from active predator to quiet presence beneath waves. Crews observed final maneuvers, engines humming softly, ballast shifting deliberately, and steel sliding through water with gentle persistence. Letters, whispers, and memory anchored thought, providing subtle continuity and reflection amid endings. Even absence carried meaning, measured in rhythm, endurance, and quiet awareness. The Atlantic absorbed all impartially, vast and unchanging, holding both story and silence within its patient expanse. Observation guided motion, reflection guided presence, and memory carried the subtle echo of experience. Even the final dives, deliberate or surrendered, became part of the gentle rhythm of the ocean, persistence tempered by calm. The wolf packs dissolved into history, yet the echo of their presence remained beneath the waves. And in this patient, enduring silence, the Atlantic held both memory and absence as companions, vast and eternal. The surrender, scuttling, and vanishing of vessels marked the quiet conclusion of an era. Crews moved deliberately, anchored by sensory experience, reflection, and patient awareness. Letters, hums of machinery, smells of salt and diesel, and subtle vibrations of steel, grounded presence in enduring meditation. Even endings were measured and intentional, marked by observation, skill, and quiet rhythm. The Atlantic received all vast, impartial, and patient, holding both absence and reflection beneath unchanging waves. Memory became companion, experience became rhythm, and quiet observation became enduring guide. The Wolf of the Atlantic existed now as echo, persistent in reflection, yet gentle in presence. Every sinking surrender or vanishing became part of a calm, enduring meditation, shaping thought and memory beneath patient water. And in this stillness, the Atlantic held the end of the wolf packs with quiet, eternal patience. As the last echoes faded, the Atlantic returned to its natural rhythm, vast, patient, and eternal. The Type VIs were gone from active pursuit, their legacy existing only in reflection, memory, and subtle presence. Crews carried the hum of engines, the sway of vessels, and the scent of salt and diesel as companions in gentle remembrance. Letters whispered recollections and tactile memory anchored thought in continuity, reflection, and quiet observation. Even absence held weight, marking endurance, skill, and subtle awareness beneath the waves. The Atlantic, patient and impartial, absorbed both story and silence, holding memory and presence in equal measure. Observation and reflection persisted, a rhythm that transcended action, anchoring thought and memory in gentle awareness. And in this patient, enduring quiet, the last dive of the Wolf of the Atlantic became a meditation, echoing softly through history and memory beneath the indifferent sea. The ocean whispered, vast and eternal, carrying both presence and silence in gentle, patient embrace. The Atlantic stretches endlessly, its surface calm, its depths unknowable, and its presence eternal. Beneath the waves, the wrecks of the Type VII submarines rest quietly, rusting slowly into patient stillness. Steel frames, once filled with life, skill, and ambition, now lie as quiet markers of history, each one a testament to the rhythm of human endeavor. The water flows around them gently, caressing hulls and conning towers, carrying silt and memory alike through currents that have endured for centuries. Letters, journals, and stories of crews linger in thought, echoing softly in the mind like the hum of engines long stilled. Even absence has texture here, the hollow spaces of compartments, a quiet reminder of presence once lived. The Atlantic holds everything impartially, neither condemning nor praising, simply preserving and witnessing. Reflection arises naturally, carried on the slow pulse of tides and currents, and in this enduring rhythm, memory finds a home beneath the waves, calm and eternal. The ocean, vast and patient, keeps its secrets with a quiet dignity that time cannot erode. Each wreck tells a subtle story, the outline of its form tracing journeys once undertaken with careful skill and disciplined attention. The men who served on these boats are gone, yet their presence lingers in the vibration of steel, the lingering smell of salt and diesel, and the memory carried by those who survived. Currents sweep through corridors once filled with footsteps, instruments, and whispered conversation, replacing them with a slow, measured rhythm of water. The Atlantic does not forget. It archives silently, recording both endeavor and endurance, triumph and loss. Even rust and decay speak softly of passage, of the inevitable return to the patient embrace of the deep. Each submarine is a meditation on human persistence. each wreck a symbol of courage and quiet reflection. Letters and recollections from distant shores travel through time, carrying faint echoes of laughter, skill, and the hum of engines. Memory, sensation, and history merge beneath these waves, creating a subtle, continuous narrative. And in this gentle permanence, the Atlantic holds both story and silence with equal care. The ocean remembers all vast and eternal, preserving both presence and absence beneath its surface. The silence of the deep is both solemn and comforting, a rhythm that endures beyond human lifespan. The ocean absorbs absence without judgment, flowing over steel and memory with measured patience. Crews who were lost, who surrendered, or who vanished entirely are embraced in this calm, indifferent vastness. Letters, whispered stories, and the tactile recollection of vessels sustain memory in ways the ocean quietly mirrors. Currents caress each hull, bending light and silt into gentle hypnotic motion that soothes reflection and remembrance. Every compartment, corridor, and hatchway now filled with quiet water tells of experience, observation, and the subtle pulse of daily life aboard a submarine. The Atlantic carries these echoes with a rhythm that transcends history, turning each vessel into a timeless meditation on human endeavor. Reflection flows naturally here, unhurried and persistent, as the water holds both presence and story, and in this patient, enduring stillness, memory floats gently, persistent yet unobtrusive beneath the waves. The ocean preserves all with quiet dignity, vast, eternal, and impartial in its embrace. Time moves differently beneath the waves, slow and unbroken, as if history itself has paused to observe. The Type VII wrecks, their steel softened by years of contact with water, stand as monuments to endurance and quiet skill. Even absence is tangible here, felt in the spaces once inhabited by crews who knew rhythm, observation, and subtle presence. Currents weave through compartments, over conning towers and along hulls, carrying silt, memory, and motion in a gentle dance. Letters and recollections from those on distant shores accompany this underwater archive, whispering through reflection and contemplation. The Atlantic, patient and impartial, absorbs all of it, holding absence and presence in equal measure. Each wreck becomes a meditation on both mortality and persistence, steel and water entwined in slow, enduring harmony. Observation and memory merge beneath the waves, a rhythm that stretches beyond immediate human awareness. And in this quiet vastness, the Atlantic holds the legacy of the Type VII, calm, eternal, and unbroken. The ocean, patient and impartial, continues to whisper history beneath the surface. Even the smallest details persist in memory, the gentle curvature of a hull, the faint indentations of instruments long stilled, and the subtle angles of conning towers that once guided human hands. The ocean carries these shapes with quiet patience, currents brushing along steel with a hypnotic, unhurried rhythm. Letters, journals, and recollections anchor human presence in the face of absence, carrying whispers of thought, feeling, and reflection through time. The Atlantic's vastness allows both story and silence to coexist, holding triumphs and losses in gentle balance. Observation persists, though quiet and unseen, measured in the interplay of water, steel, and memory. The deep preserves endurance, skill, and reflection in subtle patterns, a rhythm that continues beyond human measurement. Even rust and decay become part of this archive, documenting impermanence with serene persistence. And in this calm meditation, memory floats above the wrecks like a gentle current, carried by both water and reflection. The Atlantic, patient and eternal, enfolds all in its quiet, vast embrace. Each vessel, Each memory, each echo is held within the ocean's enduring rhythm. History and silence intertwine beneath the surface, forming a narrative that is both gentle and unbroken. Crews, missions, and the subtle hum of engines persist in memory, interwoven with salt, steel, and the measured pulse of the deep. The Atlantic receives all with impartiality, vast and eternal, holding story and stillness as one. Letters and recollections from the past drift alongside water and silt, merging reflection with enduring presence. Even absence resonates here, tangible in empty compartments, vacant bunks, and silent passages, yet framed in patience and observation. Currents weave a hypnotic rhythm through hulls and corridors, softening the passage of time and anchoring memory in gentle awareness. The Type VII, once predator and hunter, now rests as companion to history, quiet and enduring beneath patient waves. Reflection and observation merge here, subtle and persistent, as the ocean archives both action and stillness. And in this calm, timeless meditation, the Atlantic continues to remember, vast, eternal, and unchanging. Memory and presence float together beneath the surface, endless and patient. The sea holds its secrets without judgment, carrying both human endeavor and absence with equal care. Subtle vibrations, the faint flow of currents, and the slow corrosion of steel document the passing of time with quiet precision. Letters, stories, and recollections echo softly in thought, tracing journeys beneath waves where engines once hummed and hands guided instruments. Each vessel becomes a meditation on human skill, patience, and the ephemeral nature of presence, anchored by water's enduring rhythm. Observation persists calm and deliberate in subtle currents and the gentle sway of the Atlantic. Absence and memory coexist, woven into the underwater landscape, like a quiet tapestry of reflection. Even rust and silt contribute to this archive, each particle a small witness to endurance, skill, and persistence. And in this unbroken quiet, the Atlantic carries the story of the Type VII, vast, impartial, and eternal. Every ship, every crew, every memory rests gently beneath the waves, unhurried and complete. The ocean preserves them all in calm, patient, and eternal rhythm. The Atlantic, vast and patient, continues to hold the past with serene diligence. The wrecks of the Type VII rest in quiet communion, anchored in their final resting places, each one a subtle testament to endurance, skill, and reflection. Letters, recollections, and the hum of memory flow gently through thought, merging past and present beneath patient waters. Observation and presence remain intertwined, carried in subtle awareness of the ocean's rhythm as currents sweep through hulls and corridors. The sea, indifferent yet attentive, preserves both action and absence in equal measure, vast and unbroken. Even the smallest detail, an angle of steel, a curve of hull, a dent or worn latch, carries significance in memory and reflection. Currents, silt, and light trace gentle, hypnotic patterns over these silent monuments, softening time and anchoring history in patient rhythm. And in this quiet meditation, the Atlantic continues its eternal task, holding both memory and presence with unyielding calm. Every vessel, every echo, every memory remains beneath its surface, vast, eternal, and patient. The Atlantic whispers softly, vast and timeless, carrying memory as steadily as it carries water. The Type VII, once predator and companion, now rests as quiet sentinel to the human stories it bore. Crews are gone, letters fade, yet reflection and presence persist, woven into the gentle sway of currents and the enduring rhythm of the sea. Even absence resonates, tangible in corridors and compartments, yet embraced within the ocean's patient immensity. Rust, silt, and subtle vibration chronicle both time and history, documenting the passage of years with calm persistence. Observation and reflection endure here, subtle and continuous as memory floats through water in measured hypnotic rhythm. Each wreck, each echo, each fragment of human endeavor rests gently, unhurried, beneath patient waves. The Atlantic keeps all secrets, holding story, memory, and presence in eternal balance. And in this enduring calm, the wolf of the Atlantic remains remembered, echoing softly through the depths. The ocean, vast, patient, and eternal, carries history with gentle dignity, whispering forever beneath its surface.